Hello, everybody. Welcome. Do not adjust your internet because you are having a crisis. Me, Crisis with a K, here live from New Zealand in startling new HD. Oh my goodness. And you know how this goes. We do not have much time for intros just yet because we are jumping right into content. The top 25 comic series of 25, or top 10 comic series of 2025 so far for me are you ready? And actually, it's not a top 10 anymore. It's a top 12 because I had some ties this week. So let's set the counter and get into what I think the best comics of this year are so far. Here we go. At number 12, we have Zatanna with an issue number 2 this week that was glorious, magical, and beautiful from Jamal Campbell. At number 11, Jason Aaron and Juan Ferrero's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I am absolutely loving from IDW. Number 10, it's back in the top 10, Absolute Superman from Jason Aaron, Rafa Sandoval, Jesus Ariola, and crew. Then, new in the top 10 at number 9, we have Detective Comics, this run from Tom Taylor. I cannot wait to talk about it today. Number 8, back in the top 10, is Ghost Box by Mike Carey from Comixology Originals. Number 7, The Tin Can Society from Rick Remender's Giant Generator, written by Peter Warren with art from Francesco Mobley and something colors or letters by Chris Chattery. Then we have the Ultimates from Dennis Camp. We have the Power Fantasy, which I get to talk about today, from Kieran Gillen, Caspar Wingard, and Clayton Cowles. Then we have Avengers from Jed McKay and one of my favorite artists in the industry right now, Fareed Karami. I'm sorry, I'm trying to talk too fast. I'm not ready yet. Because then comes number 3, Batman Dark Patterns. Number 2, The Nice South by the Sea, My Whole Personality. Number 1, FML by Kelly Sue DeComic, David Lopez, Chris Peter, and Clayton Cowles. Look at that. I did it in a minute, y'all. I did it, but guess what? We're not done yet because I have something new for you today for the top of the show before we even get into the greetings. What's that? Well, today I've also tried something new, which is my pick of the week. And what that means is, let me go to single page so you're not spoiled. So many new pieces of technology to worry about. It means that I am going to show you the picks that I made that I thought would be my top comics of the week last week when I wrote about comics on Crushing Crisis. And then we're going to see, I'm not going to fully review them. You've got to stay tuned for that. But we're going to see what they turned out to be. So my DC Comics pick of the week, I guess let's start the timer. This is new, so I have no idea how it's going to go. I guess we'll start with DC. My DC pick of the week was Detective Comics when I wrote about it on Crushing Crisis for my previews last week. Was that, in fact, my favorite DC book of the week? Spoilers, yes, it was. It was my favorite DC book of the week. My pick of the week was correct. For Marvel, my pick of the week last week when I wrote about it on Crushing Crisis was One World Under Doom, number 2, from Ryan North, R.V. Silva, and David Curiel. Did that turn out to be my favorite comic book from Marvel of the week? No, it was Jed McKay's and Fred Crummy and Federico Blee's The Avengers, number 24, which wrapped up their space heist arc. I cannot wait to talk to you about that. Then my Image pick of the week. Did you know I did new releases on Image for Crushing Crisis for the past 10 plus weeks? Yes, I do. My Image pick of the week was Bug Wars, which has been ensconced in my top 10 by Jason Aaron and crew. Was that my favorite Image comic of the week? No, it was the final issue of James Tynion and Joshua Hickson's The Deviant. Fair enough, because I had not read this yet, so I had no idea that I would be anticipating it this much. Also, Indie Pick of the Week, which I don't write about on Crushing Crisis, only exclusive here streaming. I thought my top book of the week, I know I'm out of time, this is new, that would be The Serpent in the Garden from Mike Mignola, Ben Steinbeck, and Dave Stewart, because I love the first 2 issues so much, but actually, totally shocking me, my issue of the week from Indie, and I know, Indie, loosely defined, meaning non-big 3, was Out of Alcatraz from Christopher Cantwell and Tyler Crook. So I cannot wait to talk to you about all of those comics, and I cannot wait to talk to you in general. Hopefully this is all coming through super clear, because as I said, for the first time, I am coming to you in HD, and for the first time, I am coming to you without that little StreamYard duck in the corner. There have been some improvements in the technology. So let's do a quick hello to the chat. Then we're going to do a moment of crisis, which I truly do not have anything prepared. Oh my goodness. And then we're going to get to talking about the new comics. So let's see. We had Raptor Rancher actually beating Bunkmaster B in this week. Hello, Raptor Rancher. Matt H saying hello and thanks. Thanks for you and your watching, your views, your eyeballs, Matt H. We have Bunkmaster, of course, who said you might just skip all the comics this week and let me read them all. I read over 60 comics this week, which even for this crazy person is a really, really big week. My friend Edwin Billiot, who's making some delicious stuffed peppers in the kitchen, wish I could have them, although here we'd call them stuffed capsicum. Kane saying good morning and agreeing that there are so many good comics this week, but also encouraging me not to overdo it. Jerome Paul's hello has a new pitch that I should be going over the facsimile editions out every week and maybe using that as a chance to do a retro read. We might try that next week. I had my eye out this week and I didn't notice any. Max Appleman saying comics, but also guitar. Max Appleman, as you know, a close friend of the channel. He has his own channel, which is that channel, and he does a Beatle Bop jazz Beatles cover every week. This week it is a multi-guitar cover of Glass Onion, which I would posit is one of the Beatles' more hard-rocking Beatles songs. There's not a lot of heavy Beatles songs. Of course, Helter Skelter being one of them, but I would say Glass Onion is one of their very specific rock songs. Raging Sloths is here, can't stay, but we'll definitely catch the replay, that's fine. So interesting that Raging Sloths named both Bug Wars and Out of Alcatraz my top indie pick of the week going into the week, and then, or my top image pick going into the week, and also my top indie pick of the week. So the taste jumped out from Raging Sloths. Hello to Super Drop, a regular, a fifth of Jack Gaming. Hello to you. So he's pushed his Make My Singles for the Sunday for the morning. I guess maybe you were doing your show later in the day. I don't mean to compete with that. It's a heavily dotted landscape of live streamers, and this was the one place I could think to stick my flag. My friend Tim Burnham poking his head in and listening in while he cleans around the apartment. Hello to Ryan Bragg. Hello to James Abel. You know, we're separated, but it's complicated. Hello to Logan Wayne and everyone in the chat. Logan, who leaves such great comments. Logan, I want to say that maybe you were one of the two people who had a question I didn't get to last week. If you look at the pinned comment on last week's video, don't do it now, don't leave. But if you do, I went through the whole chat. I truly read the whole chat afterwards. And I found a couple of chats that I had not answered. And I either answered them privately for people or I put them in a comment if I didn't know the best way to get in touch with people. And I think yours was one of those. Hello to Georgie Chimchimov. Hello to Stephen Patterson. Hey to Hank. Oh my gosh, you all showed up really early. Hello to Josh Earl of Lemongarb. Finally catching it live. I'm so happy you are. Hello to my friend Cyril with the Cyrillic alphabet. A cool angel. Never underestimate the power of a reboot. Yeah, StreamYard was not talking to me before and I was like, this is not going to work if I can't share my screen. Rebooted and everything's fine. Always turn it off and turn it back on to that. Again, Saz Murph, hello to you. Tiago Pessoa, hello to you. Pity Ma, so many of my favorite people to chat comics with. What up from Keith saying hi to confirm you exist in this moment in time. Now people are starting to enthuse about the stuff in my top 10. So we'll hit pause there. So let's go to, oh gosh, what comes next? A Moment of Krisis. But let me just remind you that after the Moment of Krisis, we're going to do a little Ask Me Anything. Although the goal is always to start talking about the new comics earlier in the stream. But if you have some interesting questions about comics, about me, about how heavily I sweated doing my lip liner today because I knew it was going to be in HD, feel free to ask those questions and I will try to get to them at the beginning. And if not, I will answer them in the comments later. But now let's have a moment of krisis. Or off the top of my head, I rant and rave about something from the internet. And this, I think I know what I'm going to do. I haven't like pre-scripted it because I saw this wild comment from Brevoort, our good friend Tom Brevoort, who edits the X-Men line in his Substack newsletter last week. People were saying, you know, he's worried about if series are going to get to number 10 or not. And what does he have to say about these short-running series? And I'm trying to find the exact quote because I don't want to misquote him because I'm about to really scream at him. And he says, if 10 issues isn't long enough for you to feel comfortable, how many would? 11, 15, 20? The truth of the matter is that most series that are launched these days aren't going to command enough of an audience to reach those digits. We can pretend that the situation is otherwise, but it simply isn't so. So the only advice that I can give to you is to pick up whatever series appeals to you and don't worry so much about 6 months from now or whenever. And of course, Tom Brevoort is saying this on the heels of several X-Men series getting canceled at number 10, X-Factor, X-Force, and NYX. It's kind of unprecedented to be losing 3 anchoring X books all at once with no other team titles really being announced to replace them. We have Weapon X, but that's a One World Under Dune tie-in. We have 3 teams down and no 3 teams to replace them. And I've really been thinking a lot about this comment this week because it is so absurd that Tom Brevoort is basically saying the market can't support a book, most books in general, for 11 issues when Image doesn't have any problem with that. DC, Marvel's distinguished competition, doesn't seem to have any problem with that. There are plenty of indies. Dynamite is getting Thundercats into the 10 plus, Space Ghost into the 10 plus. What is so broken at Marvel right now that they can't get a series past issue 10? But I think to look at the answer to that question, we've got to look at Marvel's market strategy right now. And Marvel's market strategy is we're going to have all of our big tentpole books that you're familiar with, but we're not going to let any of them run to 30 issues because we want that sweet, sweet number one reselling, new number one, everybody buys it, right? But then we're just going to flood the zone. And we're all familiar with the idea of flood the zone due to our paying attention to American politics right now. But Marvel's got the same tactic. They basically, for the X books, first the launch was 6, then it was 9. We got up over 20 X books in the first 7 months of the launch of From the Ashes. That's a flood of the zone. And the same thing for One World Under Doom. We just flood the zone with so many miniseries. There's Doom's Division, Doom Academy. There's some kind of Doom Avengers coming. Things that nobody was asking for that just are out there. Now, I love all Marvel characters equally, except for Jean Grey. I love maybe a little bit more. And Dazzler. So I'm happy when they flood the zone with all these books. But when you look at who's going to support these books in the market, of course, they're either all 5-issue miniseries or they're dying off at 10 because Marvel is so busy flooding the zone that they're not doing this thing they used to be very good at about 10 years ago, which is making sure every title marries perfectly with a pitch. And we can see that absolutely in X Factor. X Factor, historically, what does it mean? Either original 5 X-Men, Investigations, or Havoc, right? So they have Havoc, but there's no real investigations, and they put Mark Russell on it, and they kind of make it a jokey, haha humor title with lots of characters dying. That feels like the Ecstatics brand. We've heard me say this before, but then you wonder why nobody's showing up for it. And it got canceled at 10, even though X Factor usually runs long. It's because nobody knows what the hell it is. For the people who read the solicits, they're like, that's not the X Factor I thought it was going to be. And then the people who bought it, it wasn't the X Factor it's going to be. And I think when we see so many Marvel books dying at 10, there's almost always a reason. It's not that the market just hates comic books now, Tom Brevoort. Not that I don't want to mischaracterize you. I know that's not what you're saying, but DC seems to have no problem. And let's look at some of the things DC is doing. When they launch a book, they launch the book with the most obvious title for the book. They try, sometimes it's got, like The Question all along the Watchtower, so people realize as it ties in with Justice League, or they did the Atom Project and they called it Justice League, the Atom Project, so that they can help fans find it in the solicits, but they're not naming things just random things for no reason. Like this new Gods title, it could have been named like A New God on Earth, or Miracle, the New Miracle or something, but then nobody would have known what it was, so they called it the familiar brand name, The New Gods. The other thing is DC is not trying to launch a bunch of stealth miniseries. The New Gods is solicited as a 12-issue series. Everybody knows it's going to run for 12, and then DC gets to look like a good guy if they extend it. It's the same way Poison Ivy started in 2022 from G. Willow Wilson. Originally was maybe going to be a miniseries, and then they got to look like a good guy when they extended. And then when some things don't get extended, like Two-Face, they get to say, oh, well, we didn't extend it. So DC is setting expectations. They are using the titles that fans want, and they are making sure there are stories in those titles that fans will love. They know who the New Gods fans are. They know what they want to read. They want to read Apocalypse, New Genesis, Mr. Miracle, Big Barda. That's all in that book. And if we look at the books at Marvel that are crashing out at 10, and it's not a new phenomenon. Captain Marvel crashed out at 10 2 years ago. There's been plenty of Marvel books that have not made it to that promised land of a third arc. I would argue that a lot of them just do not figure out what they're about fast enough. And I know that's part of the Marvel method. I know it's the world outside your window. I know we're supposed to just be patient and watch these heroes grow and evolve. But in today's market, I think the one thing that Brevoort is right about is that people are really fickle, and their budget and their time is stretched really thin. And so they don't have time to last until issue 7, 8, 9 to get what the point of the title is. So I want to I was boggled by this statement. I think there are plenty of ways for fans to support books past issue 10. I think fans are eager to do that, and I think they're doing it across the industry. I think Marvel is having a very distinct, specific problem now, and one of those problems is that is Tom Brevoort ready for 2025 in comic books the way that the editors of these other companies are ready? I don't know. I'm not a Marvel editor. I'm sure I'd be crap at that job, but just to come out on your weekly Substack, which you have the time to do, and say we can't pretend that the situation isn't otherwise, that most titles cannot get to 10 issues and beyond. I just am not sure when DC just got Shazam and Power Girl to a very healthy almost 20 issues. I'm not sure if that is right. Okay. So that's my moment of crisis for today. Never pre-prepared, always from the top of my head. Although I knew I was probably going to talk about Brevoort because it just made me get like when I read it, flames on the side of my face. Okay, now let's go back to the chat. Some of you were reacting to my top 10s, trying to find where that was. And then we will resume. Yes, Jean Paul's HD. I know. And there's no duck. There's no duck in the corner. Big changes here. Yeah, a lot of changes. Zatanna, I love it. Highly recommended it. I don't know my Zatanna continuity that well, so maybe it's just all wrong. I don't know, but it's beautiful and it's funny and it's charming. But we'll talk about that more at the Z's. You've got to hang on for 6 hours because there's so many books in this week. James Abel, 12, not 10 yet. You know why? Because it was like a dead heat for 12, and I was switching 9, 10, 11, and 12 over and over and over again, and I just couldn't decide. I was like, you know what? There's no rules, and 12 is my favorite number, so we're just going to have a 12. Actually, I almost put 13, but that would be unlucky. But I did have a 13th book that was like right there. Yeah, you know what? I can cheat. I make the rules here. It's my show. But yes, it was cheating. Dennis Camp, yeah, that Ultimates book's so good. My friend Lance McNair probably can't stay on today, but I know you'll be back and watch. I know. Richard Fearing, always love to see you here. I am no Jedi in the chat. James Abel agreeing that Out of Alcatraz was great. Mall 360, perfect time to wake up from a nap. I love a power nap. I like to power nap almost every day if I can, even if it's just for 45 minutes. I have a very interesting life where I can usually squeeze in a 45-minute nap, but I also get up every day and start working at like 5 a.m. because I work with Americans and they're already having their day. So when I'm taking a nap, the Americans are already done working, so it kind of works out. Let me just remind you, if you had any AMAs, now would be the time to get the AMAs in. Oh gosh, I lost my place. Okay, here we go. And just a reminder, this is just me having some conversation. We're going to get into talking over. I read 62 new comic books this week. So we're going to be talking about comics very, very shortly. RIP to the Streamy Duck. You know, he lived a good long life, and maybe he'll be back one day if I decide that HD is too scary to see all these pores in. But for now, we are going to give that duck a little bit of a retirement party. Neil Pereira saying happy Monday to everyone. Eric Garza, hello to you. Uda Void saying just finished Chris Ware's date books and wrapping Doug Munch's Aztec Ace. I love Aztec Ace. I have it usually within arm's reach. I must have done it better. Here it is. Aztec Ace. I've not read all of it, so definitely drop your review in the chat. Diamond Publishing to go up for auction tomorrow. Oh boy, that I can't even devote any brain space to that right now. Don't forget to hit the like button. Richard Fearing reminds you, and let me also remind you, it really helps me when you recommend this to somebody who you know would like it. So if you're like, you don't have to recommend the whole show. 24 hours later, I put timestamps for every single book. So if there's a book that you really liked from last week, and then, or you just like how I talk about it, and you want to share it with people, it's really, really helpful to me. If you like, just do copy link and then send that with the timestamp to a bunch of people. But it is also helpful if you smack thumb. It's like 7-Up in class. Remember when we were little and they'd push your thumb down and then you'd have to try to figure it out based on your scent. So you have to give me a thumbs up, and I don't know your scents, so I'm not going to be able to figure out which ones of you did it. But if you all did it, then I can just assume that you all gave me a thumbs up. Okay. Logan Wayne, it's the pinned comment on last week's video. I'm not 100% sure it was your comment. I just, in my mind, remember I wanted to talk to you about something, so I think it was you. Garin95, hello, be watching later during the graveyard shift. A wonderful time to be trying to stay awake while paying attention to my high-speed rambling. Sometimes when I need to go to sleep at night, I will put me on 2 times speed, which is way too fast because I know how fast I talk. It's one of the features of the show. If it was an interview show, I would talk slower. And then I try to follow it, and I get lost within a sentence because I cannot follow me at 2 times speed, and then I fall asleep. So don't do that. Stay awake. A lot of people saying about smashing the like button. Aimee Mann is one of my favorite songwriters. Sharon Powell's, I believe that she is a modern saint. I was almost going to start playing Aimee Mann right there. Did you see? I listen to Aimee Mann nonstop. She's probably the favorite artist of the house as a whole, of all the people that live in the house. Yeah, huge Aimee fan. Actually, I'm in the middle of listening to all of her discography chronologically right now. I'm on the Third Till Tuesday album, but I love Aimee Mann. Little Bombs, if you've never listened to an Aimee Mann song, or if you only know Save Me, which was nominated for an Academy Award, I would recommend Little Bombs. Now we're getting into some comments on the Moment of Krisis. All due respect to Brevoort, I'm not an editor of a major comics publisher and probably would be terrible at it, but I generally hate all of his takes. Yeah, Keith, Brevoort's interesting. I know a lot of people, he gets a lot of hate online, and I really don't want to perpetuate that, and should he have seen that, I hope he doesn't feel like I'm perpetuating hate towards him, because I think he's a brilliant editor. I think there's really no better editor in comics when it comes to helping the writer break the story and wrangling the story and figuring out how to get the story out. But I sometimes just don't know about the way he talks to fans and interacts with fans. I don't think he understands who the new fans are as well as he understands who the old fans are. And, you know, we're getting up there. We need the 10, 20, even 30-year-olds to be excited about comics. And I don't know if he's as connected to them. Of course, he sees the sales and he has plenty of background information that we don't have. So I don't want to presume, but sometimes he feels a little, out of touch, in the words of Hall Notes. You're out of touch. You're out of touch. Mink 0029, I have a chronology dilemma whenever I read comics. I badly want to read Hoxpox, but I can't get myself to do it without reading X-Men in order. How do I break out of the mindset? You have to think of yourself as a little child in 1982, walking up to the spinner rack in the drugstore with $1 in your pocket, who's going to buy 2 or 3 comics with that $1, and you got whatever comics you got. I purposely, every week now, will try to read one comic deep into a run that I have not caught up on so that I get myself out of this. Everything's always got to be in order. Part of the fun in comics is, unlike a TV show where, I mean, now in streaming, this isn't true. So this is the old person talking. Unlike a TV show where if you saw something midway through the season back in the day, you would, even over the summer break, they wouldn't rerun all of them. You would just never know what came before. Now in this digital world, we always want to know the whole history, but comics are not made like that. The whole point of comics is you can never know everything. So you got to sit with that, right? This knowing everything. And this is coming from somebody who has the X-Men reading orders, who has over 200 guides, including 2 that I just built last week that nobody's even seen yet, I don't think. This is coming from me, and I am telling you that you need to let that go, okay? Because reading it might make you more excited to get started with the older comics. I did that with one book we'll talk about this week, Mouse Guard, which has been on my list and was in the Evergreen library stream last year on Near Mint, and I was like, I've got to finally read it. And I saw there was a new #1 this week, and I said, you know what? Am I going to binge all of Mouse Guard in like a day and not even fully enjoy it? No, I'm just going to read this new #1. You know what? Spoilers, I'm not going to tell you until we get there. Phenomenal AC, Brevoort is a joke. People like him are why I won't ever go back to single issues. I'll stick with Omni so I can just read the characters I love from the time that I loved them. Well, you know, I love new comics. I'm never going to be this person who's like, new stuff is bad, new music is bad, new comics are bad. But I would still agree with part of the sentiment, Phenomenal AC, that sometimes it's better to just read things after it's been collected. And that's why I don't really tune into the solicit drama too much. I don't want to get angry about the way a book's been solicited or even when it's canceled. I just can't help but notice when an X book gets canceled because I'm in the X world and I hear those conversations. But yeah, I very much just choose to not engage. And I think it's really smart to choose to not engage in single issues and be like, you know what? I will read it when it's all together in one place. I think that is a great strategy for protecting your free time and your mental health. On that note, Cruel Angel says, I'd rather they call them limited series because that's what they truly are. Yeah, why not just say 1 of 10? Then watch the fans freak out that X-Force is only going to get 10 issues. And if it's good enough, it'll get another arc. It's just, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe Marvel has lots of data on that. But it seems to be working just fine for DC is what I'm saying. Okay. Logan Wayne, obligatory question about my thoughts on the latest X-Men Omnibus announcement and map of the book. So you got to be subscribed to Near Mint Condition. Please subscribe to me, though. That's helpful to me and to you because you'll see when these notifications come out. But subscribe to Near Mint Condition. Omar's on a tear announcing new things because he got to announce them before they get solicited, like to Penguin, Random House, and Amazon. There was an X-Men book. Gosh, what was it? There's been so many. I'm barely keeping track. Oh, Bendis Uncanny. I told you, I know what I'm talking about, and Omar would never tell me something ahead, so I don't know what these books or their maps are. I told you that we were going to get Bendis Uncanny, and that's where Battle of the Atom would be, and it's in there, and that's great. Personally, if it was me, I would also put Mike Carey's No More Humans in there because it is a direct sequel to Battle of the Atom, and there's no other context that it's going to make sense. People are like, well, we'll go in the Mike Carey omnibus. It's not going to make any sense there. It's a direct sequel with all the same characters to Battle of the Atom. It should go in the Bendis omnibus. Otherwise, I think it was mapped appropriately. There are 3 specials, one of which is called Uncanny X-Men Special that I would want to put into that book, but somebody in the comments made a good point. They probably fit better in a Nova omnibus if we ever got that. I just hate when an omnibus leaves out issues that have the title of the omnibus. It's the Uncanny X-Men Marvel Now omnibus. Anything that said Uncanny X-Men, in my opinion, should go in it. George Chimchinov, sorry, blinked in and out. Hard to support most when there's too much books. Yeah, and I mean, I know I'm weird. There's maybe even 10 books a week is now $50 And then even if you're on Comixology and you're getting the 10 or 15% discount or whatever, I know that's why people use Marvel Unlimited and DC Unlimited. I'm not ever recommending people to be freaks like me. So yeah, that's the other thing. If you got 20 X books a month and you're like relying on that X-Men Wednesday Warrior to roll in with their open wallet and support all of them, we're talking about that person potentially spending $100 a month just to follow X-Men every month. That's out of pocket. I bet they would be more successful if they came out and they said, there are only going to be 10 X-Men books at a time. And once one of them get canceled, we're moving on to the next one. So if you don't support this goddamn X-Force book, it's going to be gone. I bet then people would buy X-Force because there would only be 10 books. Tom Brevoort. Cool. It seems like they don't have any faith in the new titles. Yeah, it really feels like a throw things at the wall and see what sticks sort of strategy. Jordan Parles, if Swamp Thing offered you one of the fruits of his back, would you eat it? That's unexpectedly sexual. I don't know. I'm a little bit of a germaphobe. In the words of my South Philly family, I kind of skeeve things and people and even myself. I really don't like. So the idea of eating something that came from a tree that's also a person may be a bridge too far for me. I don't know. I think maybe I wouldn't eat one of the fruits. I don't know. That's just a hot take. Matt H. Hey, I have me on the background as I play PS5 with my son, so I probably can't comment. I'll also watch the language then. Things get spicy as we get into hours 2 and 3. I have certain albums that I associate with certain video games. One of them is the X-Men game on Super Nintendo, not the Spider-Man, the X1. Hate that game. But the Spider-Man one where you could be Psylocke or Beast or Wolverine, or was the last one Gambit, I want to say. And I listened to No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom nonstop while I was playing the Wolverine levels of that game. So to this day, if I hear a song from Tragic Kingdom, one of my top 10 albums of all time, I immediately see Wolverine's costume in my mind, like sense memory. Okay. Having limited issues, Mall360 says, limited to under 10 to 12 usually makes me happy because it means I'm saving money on my pull list the next month. And you can, and you can plan, right? It's hard to budget for this thing, especially the other thing Marvel does, all these one-shots. DC has a couple of one-shots, but they just don't. And I know Marvel has more comic book direct market share, but DC's doing fine. And also DC crushed them in the book market. The stat came out last week. This was almost the moment of crisis. That DC compact comics sold more in the book market than all of Marvel in the book market, which is crazy. James, the media announcer, saying, hey, Crisis, wow, y'all are going off. And what did I think of the Epic announcements in this week's Omni News? Loving them. Love. I love when Epic lines are finished. The Epic poll for reprints is next week. It's going to be kind of at the same time as the show. I'm working on it in the background with Omar. I'm not on that. Usually that's Curtis and Omar, but just because I want to watch. So I'm like, selfishly, can my show be earlier? Can your show be later? Can we find a way to watch? And I'll answer this one question from Max Appleman. What's my favorite Bowie album? And is it the album you listen to the most? Well, yes, because Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars is my number 2 album of all time. I can't not say that Joni Mitchell's Blue is the best album of all time. I think that's my number 1. Should I do, now that I don't have the duck anymore and there's no limits to how long I can stream every month, should I do a music stream once a month? Maybe. Okay. I just want to answer Helen's question because she commented for the first time last time and she has a question. I don't want to leave her hanging. Jean Grey centric stories. Everybody's going to say the Dark Phoenix Saga and everybody's going to say New X-Men. I would say Uncanny X-Men 281 is a really good Jean Grey story. I would say X-Men Red from Tom Taylor is not the best story of all time, but it's a good Jean Grey book. And she was so good throughout Krakoa, but it's so scattered that I don't know that there's any one like wowza, this is the best. And also the Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix went right after they got married and they go to the future. Cyclops and Jean, that really gets very close to the heart of Jean. And I think it's really, really good. Okay. Well, I do like the both. David Kirkby, hello to you. That's one Aimee Mann's band. I forget with who, but it's her band. And they're just perfect. Every single song on that record is perfect. Absolutely perfect. Wow. You guys kept chatting. But I need to start talking about the comic books. So I will see all these afterwards. I love Spike Stonehand. Thank you so much for chiming in and listening. But I'm going to move into the talking about the comics now because last week we went so much longer than this, not talking about the comics, and that gets dangerous. So let me open the stuff. I'm seeing one of my PDFs didn't PDF, which is going to be a problem for all of us shortly. So talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. Do you ever use the word uncanny in your actual life, or has it become so tied to being about X-Men that you couldn't possibly ever use the word uncanny otherwise, because to you, it would just be talking about X-Men? I do sometimes say that things are uncanny. And then I always feel like after I say it, like, tee-hee, like I'm making this little X-Men in joke. Okay, I'm going to look one more place to see where this PDF is. And otherwise, I'm just going to start making it in the background. And hopefully my computer won't freak the hell out because we need to get started. Oh, there it is. There it is. I found it. Okay, we're all good. All right. So I read so many books this week, as I have mentioned. Let me get that down to a single page. I did do one catch-up read this week, so that's why this book is here, Exit City from Mad Cave. It was delayed from February, and it came out last week. I did not realize it came out last week, and so I did not get to read it until this week. So that is what we will start with. And remember, I don't have as much time to see your comments here, but I'm going to take probably 3 breaks along the way. One around the F's or the G's, one after M, and one at the end of the alphabet. So if you do have your own reviews to share for these comics, please absolutely share them, and I will get them up on the screen then. And I will also get a chance to answer some more of your questions throughout and also at the end of the stream as well. Because honestly, what would be the fun? I could just pre-record this whenever I felt like it instead of getting up early and being in HD on a Monday morning at 9 o'clock. But I do it because you're here. So I absolutely care about your chats. And as we know, as it was proven last week, I literally go back through the stream and I read every single chat. So every one of your words will make it to my eyeballs. Okay, so there was one catch-up read from last week. It's Exit City from London and Carl Mostert, who I believe passed away. And so some of this book was drawn by Villalobos instead. And it was really good. I mean, I really, really like this Mad Cave series. It kind of ended in a way, you know, limited series, I think, tend to end either in the way you exactly expect, or they try to put a big, big twist on it. So this ended exactly the way you expected. It tied up all the plots. It answered all the questions. The people that needed comeuppance got their comeuppance, and also it kind of worked as an origin story for these 2 cops and how they might start working together in the future. So it worked for me there. I don't think I was looking for a big twist from this. It was big twisted already. I just think issue 3 kind of telegraphed how it was going to end, and then it ended how it ended. If this was an ongoing, I would absolutely keep reading it, but I'm sure that Mark London is very sad that Carl Mostert's not going to be here to continue to create it with it, and Mostert's art was incredible on this. Raymond Villalobos did an amazing job filling in, and David Barron on colors, Dave Sharp on letters. I think it's a really fun book. I've talked about the premise before, but basically there's this city off of the coast of California. It is a U.S. kind of non-whatever territory that they just let do on their own, and all sorts of illegal stuff happens there, and the police force is super, super corrupt, but this is just one police agent and one kind of FBI-style agent coming together to solve one of the many problems of that city, and I really enjoy it. As we know, I do not read 2000 AD anymore. It used to feel like a reward, but then it started feeling like a job, and so I stopped, which brings us to, at the top of the alphabet, Absolute Batman. And let me tell you this, folks. I did not like several of the books at the beginning of the alphabet today, but then over the course of the whole thing, it became my highest rated week, and I could not even tell you how long. I was scrolling back, and months and months and months. So please stick with me if I'm slamming some of these earlier books. I swear that the majority of the books this week I absolutely loved. This is Absolute Batman by Scott Snyder, Nick Dragotta on art, colors from Frank Martin, letters from Clayton Cowles. I don't understand the point of this book. I don't. Here's what I get the point is. Batman hurts people more. He stabs them more. He breaks more of their bones. He's big. He's got those big bat titties and his giant back. Everybody's big. Everybody's large. And Nick Dragotta is drawing real nice. I just don't understand. To me, it doesn't feel materially different than any other Scott Snyder Batman book, other than Batman's more violent. Yeah, Martha's alive, whatever. And the art in this, again, was amazing. But story-wise, this just was so dull to me. And I felt this way the whole arc. But I don't love Scott Snyder's writing. So this could just be a me thing. And I know many of you are liking it. But to me, there's very little that would have prevented us reading this story in just a Black Label book. I don't understand why it's so good to be an Absolute book. To me, this is the bottom of the barrel of the Absolute barrel. However, now we come to something closer to the top of the barrel in the Absolute barrel, which is Absolute Flash. Now, Absolute Flash #1, it is well established that I do not love Jeff Lemire's writing. However, I do really, really love Nick Robles' art. I would pick up any series to see Nick Robles' art. And I love Adriano Lucas's colors. And also Tom Napolitano went off on the letters on this book. Like this lettering effect, I was immediately interested in this book just to see that, right? The art is amazing. Amazing. And Adriano Lucas does not do his typical color look that he's been doing in a lot of other DC books. I had to triple check that it was him because I really thought it was like Jordi Belair or Tamara Bonvillain, with all, especially Tamara Bonvillain. This looks kind of like her colors. Nope, Adriano Lucas. I really enjoyed this. It has Wally West as a military brat. His mom has died. He lives on a base with his dad, and Bart Allen is a scientist on that base. And Bart Allen is like trying, Dr. Allen, as he's called in this page, trying to connect with Wally. And Bart is experimenting with the Speed Force, and the book cuts back and forth before and after something that happens with the Speed Force. Great mystery, great personal stuff. Personally, I think the personal stuff maybe was like a little on the totally vague side, which is just who Jeff Lemire is. He writes the same story about a son and his dad every single time. And even though I am predisposed to like those kind of human scenes, when we got to that scene, I was like, okay, I read this and 25 Jeff Lemire comic books already, but I think all the Flash stuff was really, really interesting. And again, gorgeous, totally, totally holds up that these absolute books are art books. Number one. I mean, they have amazing writers on them, but they are all, I think we can safely say at this point, art books. Okay. So this is Adventureman, and this goes back to what I said of sometimes, just jump in. Long ago, whenever it first started coming out, I read the first couple of issues of this from Matt Fraction and Terry and Rachel Dodson with Clayton Cowles on lettering. I have no recollection. I looked in my notes. I'm like, I don't know her. I've never heard of this before. I was remembering that other book that they did together, like Red One, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to read the book and judge as I judge it. There's like the third Adventureman series. It was pretty charming if you really like Terry Dodson's art. Terry Dodson was the most Dodson that he's ever been on art here. And if you enjoy him, I think he's at peak here. I find his figures to all kind of just look like they've been overinflated, a little bit like balloons. Sometimes they annoy me. But I did really like the story. Basically, there's this series of pulp novels that they found a big stack of not only the existing volumes, but extra volumes that never came out. And is there some kind of influence between the powers and the abilities of the people in these pulp novels and this family who's researching them in the real world? And we just follow one of them who's a paramedic who's trying to save a guy who's been shot, as she maybe has to access some of those pulp powers unwittingly to get this guy safely to the hospital where he can be saved from his bullet wound. Is pretty snappy. And I should have saved the credits page. The credits page really presents every possible person that will be named in the cast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Over a dozen people in the cast with really bold likenesses of them. And I know indie books don't often do that. It's a very Marvel kind of thing. It helped me so much because I was not familiar with this. And there's this extra mystery undercutting it of this one major character is clearly missing and everybody's upset about it. They don't fully talk about the mystery. I like that because it actually makes me not only want to continue reading, but read the issue that came before. Because I know if I'd read the prior series, I would know why he's missing, but it's presented as just enough of a tickler here to get me interested. And that's why I do advocate for just jumping in the middle of a series sometimes, because a good series will make you want to read backwards from it and forwards from it as well. And I think that this did it. Again, I think if you really like Terry Dodson's art, colored by Rachel Dodson, or if you really, really like pulp fiction, pulp hero, not the movie Pulp Fiction, but like pulpy fiction, this book could really click for you. I don't read Archaic from Ahoy. I tried to read the first issue, didn't really click for me. I don't read Archie's Mr. Justice from Archie Comics. I don't read Assassin's Apprentice 3, number 4 from Dark Horse because I've never played that, I think, video game, book. I don't know. You keep telling me and I keep forgetting. But I did read Astonishing Spider-Man, and we're going to use 1 minute for both of Marvel's digital titles this week. This is Astonishing Spider-Man by Scott Aukerman with art from Julius Shaw and colors from CC De La Cruz. You know how much I've been saying I hate this comic pretty much every week? This did what it needs to do. Spider-Man versus some bad guys, quips and thwips. What it needs to do, in addition to this, is bring in some other Spider people because we already have a main Spider-Man book. And again, you're never going to, I know it's just free extra Spider-Man content, but you're never going to tell a significant Spider-Man story in your digital comic book. But you could have a team up between him and Spider-Woman, between him and Aranya, between him and Spider-Punk or whatever, that we're probably not going to see in an ongoing comic. I just wish that this would get back to that like it was. Astonishing X-Men, which is now written again by Alex Packnadel with art from Philip Sevy. I got to really credit Philip Sevy here. I feel like his art really, really leveled up from what we saw before. Just the likenesses are stronger. The line work feels like has a lot more punch. I got to give some credit to artist Michael Bartolo. This is telling a story about some anti-mutant sentiment that is happening in the wake of Krakoa and how mutants, the diaspora, have kind of gone and become immigrants taking jobs with superpowers. The problem I have, and I talked to my friend Curtis of the Epic Marvel podcast about this, is look, I'm not a continuity cop. I'm a reading order cop, but I don't always remember all the things that come into the books. I don't think Skin's powers work this way. He's not Mr. Fantastic. He can extend his skin, but it doesn't have tensile strength. So he can and it's prehensile. So he can wrap the skin around you, but he can't do that arm block thing because the bones don't extend. Just the skin extends. So, and they used him wrong in the last issue too. And again, maybe I just missed some skin continuity, or maybe when they brought him back in Krakoa, they upgraded his power a little. I'm just not remembering it. But it's these little things in an X-Men books. They know it's Superman. I would never know if his power is being used right or not. These little things just sometimes take me out in an X-Men book. So comment if you've read every issue of Generation X and if you know if this is wrong or not, because to me, it struck me as wrong. Now we come to Jed MacKay's Avengers, which is one of my top 10 books of the week. I don't even need the credits to tell you this was art by Fareed Karami, colors from Federico Blee, and letters from Corey Petit. I got to start, by the way, I know we're going to go crazy over this art, but I got to start by complimenting the colors. I've been so rough on Federico Blee for, I think, 6 years now, because his art always looks blue. I don't know if because he's just got this blue bitch right in the middle and Kang to color blue. I've never seen his colors look as good as they looked on this. Never has his colors been as good as they were on this issue, which was a huge contributor. I already love Free Crummy. You heard me rant and rave. Jed MacKay seems to understand what he's got in his hands. He just steps back and he basically just gives Crummy splash pages, which means story-wise, this is a little bit slim. And actually, it was only a 4 out of 5 for me because there's just not a lot of story. It's really just an art book. But y'all, we are seeing the birth of a superstar who is going to be with us for decades right now if he takes care of his craft. This reminds me of early Brian Hitch. This reminds me of a lot of the people who kind of debuted that widescreen look in the 90s. It reminds me of Fernando Pasarin. It just reminds me not 90s, 2000s. So many people that really made an impact and made comics what they are now in terms of pacing and that widescreen looking art from the mid 2000s, but even better. Such consistent likenesses, so much great body work, musculature, characters that they feel a little bit super, they feel a little bit buff, but they're grounded in realness. His characters, especially his women, they have musculature. Carol's thick there, and I don't say that in a derogatory way. She's as thick as somebody who's an Air Force pilot, who's the leader of the Avengers should be. I could look at the art in this. I could look at it for days. This is one of the most beautiful comic books I've ever seen from Marvel. And the coloring, again, just really brings it out. The coloring on this page is what really just made me stop. Again, blue. Federico Blee is a master of blues. And the way that he does Kang's face here just made me stop and gasp. This is a 3-issue arc, so you can just pick up 22, 23, and 24. 22 should be just about to hit Marvel Unlimited, so you could read it for free if you got Unlimited. And the next arc begins in 25 with a brand new story. It's not going to have Karami on art, but he just teased on social media that he's coming back for more, and I cannot wait because is he my favorite artist right now? He's definitely my top 5. You're going to hear me talk about a lot of favorite artists, but I cannot get this guy's work out of my head. I don't know if he's a fluent English speaker, but I just noticed he had a YouTube channel right before I got on here. If I did, I would love to interview him. So I have to watch his English channel because I only fluently speak English. A little bit of French, but not well enough input, not enough to do an interview. But I would love to talk to this guy because I just want to know how his brain works. All right, so now we come to Avengers Academy, which spoilers can now be revealed. This was the book that was just outside of my top 12 this week. And the only reason is that it's not higher is that it's splitting the Avengers Academy up. So usually this book is about all of these younger generations of kids. Kid Juggernaut, Captain America of the Railways, all of them. But right now they're split up through time and they're each getting their own one-shot issues. So Anthony Oliveira with artist Carolo Borelli and colors from KJ Diaz, letters from Ariana Maher. In this issue, just focus on Red Goblin, who's Norman Osborn's grandson. We've been new, it's not a spoiler, and Moon Girl as they get thrust into a particular future that has some familiar enemies in it. I would say this is not the place to jump into this Marvel Unlimited comic that is free almost every single week, that occasionally takes a break week, because this is heavily mining not only the existing villains and story from this series so far, but also work from the previous Marvel Voices Unlimited series that I have not read any of and ran for over 100 issues. So I really have got to catch up on that. But I just love this book. I love the voices of the characters. I love that we're finding a way to keep these characters alive every week. And this has made it to issue 34. Maybe we should be doing more digital series with more X-Men that could last longer and tell more stories. And this series, by the way, is much longer than the typical, like, It's Jeff or even those Astonishing Spider-Man and Astonishing X-Men. This series, they're almost full-length issues full of story and art. So, I mean, they've been basically putting out full-length story and art out. And what did I say this was? Issue number 37. 37 issues. This is about as long as the actual run of Avengers Academy back from 2010. I saw somebody online, maybe it was on Reddit, I was saying how great this book was, and they said, I can't get into it because I love the original Avengers Academy so much. It's just a school of Avengers. Like, it's not trying to replace that team. And actually, a few characters from that team turn up, but it's, I don't know. To me, it's like saying X Factor. Oh, I can't get into X Factor because, like, Madrox isn't there. Well, that's fair. Madrox has been in over 300 issues of X Factor. But to say that you can't get into Avengers Academy because it's not that particular academy of kids, I don't know. There's a difference to me between a team book and a school book. Like, I expect that school books are going to have a new cast, but that's just me. That's just me. So now we come to Batman and Robin Year One of these DC series that has a specific lifespan that's already been solicited. It is, I believe, a 12-issue series. It's, of course, by Mark Waid and Chris Samney co-plotting, just like they did on Black Widow, with colors from Matthias Lopez and letters from Clayton Cowles. This is phenomenal. And the reason it's phenomenal is it's really playing with Robin on his first mission, which I know we've seen Year Ones before, but I love the way that they're playing with Dick Grayson's. He's still a circus kid, and he's so fresh off his trauma, and Batman wants everybody to be Batman. He's never thought about what it would be like to have somebody that's not Batman who has to be with him while he's Batman. And it just, parent speaking, as a parent, this idea that as your kid gets older and they have their own way of doing things, you have to let go of your parent way of doing things and just let them do the thing that's right for them. It's such a huge part now that I'm parenting a kid that's getting older. And I just see so much of that in this. And Bruce doesn't get the benefit of having known this kid his whole life and coming to it from that perspective. He's parenting Robin fresh off of his trauma. And the art is so good. The mission really, really works. And I like, and this is well established, I like a imperfect Batman. I like an imperfect Batman. So love that this has a Batman that makes mistakes. He gets angry. He gets frustrated at Robin. To me, that's the kind of Batman book that I want to read. As opposed to this Batman book, which is not a Batman book that I want to read. This is, of course, Batman Superman World's Finest, also by Mark Waid. And I feel like we're seeing the best and the worst of Mark Waid's storytelling instincts here. This just sets stories randomly in continuity. This has got to be towards the end of the Silver Age, the beginning of the Bronze Age. It's just utter nonsense. First of all, nothing on the cover happens on the inside. From art in the interiors from Adrian Gutierrez, colors from Matt Herms, letters by Steve Wands. It's just not interesting. Like, Floronic Man is underwater and they're trying to save this kingdom of Atlantis or something. The details are so lost in the mix, and that includes the details of the art. On a page like this, I can't understand what's happening. Like, Superman's trying to weld Robin's suit shut. Floronic Man grabs Batman's arm. Did it break? I can't tell what that snap effect is supposed to mean. But then Swamp Thing is exploding out from inside of Floronic Man. But, like, I don't understand the relationship of any of these panels to any of these other panels. And I had this experience a lot while reading this book. I just think that this book, unfortunately, so many of the issues are just throwaway. And I do like that Mark Waid brings some of these things to bear in the present day. I very much suspect that one detail from this will turn up in the current Aquaman run by Jeremy Adams, but it just, I don't know. It just doesn't appeal to me at all. I feel like the stories have to feel a little bit more significant and they have to feel like something's actually happening, but it's hard to do that in a retcon story because you're inserting it in somewhere. It just really flopped for me. And I know I'm a hater of this book in specific, but sometimes it hits for me. This arc that was 3 issues long from 35, 36, 37 did not hit for me. Now we come to Black Star. Unfortunately, I didn't get to read this from Alien Books. It's an English translation of an existing work from Ricardo Barrera and Juan Jimenez. It looked really cool to me, but I could not find it digitally this week on Amazon. And I think I also looked on Global Comics. So maybe it'll turn up later. I'll get to read it. Blood Squad 7, which, by the way, doesn't have the issue number on the cover. I think it's issue number 7, but there's no issue number. Blood Squad 7. So this is Joe Casey's Image book. that's imagining if Youngblood was still around, but retroactively making them a totally different team because Youngblood's rights are always up in the air. And so it's retro inserted Youngblood. This book, unfortunately, it just never takes flight. It's about the same thing every single month. And that thing is that this team doesn't like each other very much. They're arguing with each other over where they should appear in the media or if they should get a haircut or whatever. We're into, what is it, 7 issues? Yeah, this is issue number 7. 7 issues of that where, and some of them go crazy because of trauma. But I'm saying there's no, I love a downtime story. Like if you just want to tell that downtime story about this team, that's fine. What I don't like is it's repetitive. It feels like the same story beat for 7 issues in a row. We're at issue 8 next, and it looks like they're finally going to fight somebody, which I mean, good, I guess. But if you look at Local Man from Tim Celia and Tony Fleeks, which was critically acclaimed, everybody loved it, everybody talked it up, and only lasted 15 issues. Tom Brevoort, it made it to 15. And this is at number 8, and nothing has happened yet, and I have not seen anyone acclaim it. And I don't think the love from 40 and 50-year-olds of the original Image universe is strong enough to keep supporting a book that's not doing anything if it's not going to do anything. So I would say, rather than any interest you might have in this, just go read Local Man. Local Man did this so much better, and I'm predisposed to love this comic, and yet I still hate it. Okay. Moving on to Bug Wars. Now, this was not in my top 12 this week. It doesn't mean I don't love it, but it's for very specific reason. So this issue 2 of Bug Wars is by Jason Aaron, Mahmoud Asrar, colored by Matthew Wilson, letters by Becca Carey. It's a dream team. Here's why it's not in my top this week. The first issue had so much heart and so much lore. Half of the issue is about the lore of this bug world. It was so big, so broad. There's spiders versus beetles versus ants and all the people that accompany them, but the tiny, tiny little microscopic people. And then we also got was going in the Slaymaker house and these brothers who love each other but can't stand each other because one of them actually saw their dad and discovered him dead, but the other one didn't, so he still loves all the creepy stuff his dad lived, but the other one's creeped out. It was, I'm still talking about issue number 1 because it was a perfect number 1. This issue was just a Jason Aaron comic book, which is still a pretty good thing, especially with this creative team. But it was like the kid is captured. He doesn't know why. People drag him around. There's a lot of brutality. They have to be in a fighting tournament. They have weapons. This cool, enigmatic lady is like, let's fight. We've got to fight. You've got to use your gem. It just felt like 100 other issues of a Jason Aaron comic book I've already read. It felt like his Conan. It felt like his Wolverine. It felt like everything. That amazing lore of the first issue was only there at the margins of this one. And the heart was gone. And we knew that was going to be the case because he's away from his family. But he has his favorite beetle that he loves. And the beetle is kind of in this a little bit. But the heart isn't there either. So it was still really good. It was still for me like a 3.5 or a 4 out of 5. But it didn't have that perfect hope core balance, hope core versus lore hope core, hope lore core of the first issue. I still would heavily recommend it. It's really, really cool. It's really, really well done. It just didn't quite get to the height of the first one for me because it just feels like we're going into Aaron's trope bag now instead of things that I haven't really seen him do before. Now we come to Cable, Love and Chrome. I wish I could throw this in a bag and toss it off a cliff into a large body of water where it would sink to the bottom and never be seen again. It's Cable, Love and Chrome number 3. I hate this comic book. I hate it a lot. Here's the thing. First of all, Mike Henderson's art and our Prianto's colors completely wrong fit for a Cable in the future book. I still don't even think Henderson has a good likeness of Cable, so I think he's being wasted on here. It doesn't look like Cable, but at least in a book that's not as about like heavy technology, I think it would work better. I feel like their styles are fighting. The actual problem with this, though, is it's trying to be the most significant Cable comic book ever, and you can't do that. Just let the story breathe, but the story's not breathing. He goes into the astral plane. For some reason, his new lover's sister's in the astral plane. There's a reason. It's just a bad reason. He's like, this is the closest to death I've ever been. This is the biggest telekinetic. Everything's the definite article and everything. You can't always do the coolest, biggest thing. To me, that gets into a problem that I identify with comics. It's a crisis thing that I've coined the phrase of scope problem. If you're trying to make it the biggest, the best, the hardest, the most he's ever loved anybody, every single issue, your comic eventually lacks a veracity with fans because there's no way to do that. Unless you're Jonathan Hickman and you're telling the biggest X-Men story ever told in House of X, Powers of X, you don't get to come into my house every month and say, this is the biggest Cable story ever told. This is the most he's ever loved anyone. This is the biggest TK blast you've ever done. It doesn't read true to me. It feels like you're trying to pump up your story with lots of superlatives because you're not a very good storyteller. And I think that's consistent to the writing I've seen from this writer in other books. I don't think their writing is ready for prime time. And I think that this misbegotten cable series is a perfect example of why. This Catwoman cover, whew, that is quite a cover. I really, really love it, of this issue of Catwoman number 74. Who did that cover? Seba Fumera. Beautiful. This is written by Torren Grunbeck, art by Mariana Ignazi, colors from Patricio Del Pesce, letters from Steve Wands. If this was not a DC continuity book, it would be right on the verge of a drop for me. That said, I do have to give some credit to what is some fantastic artwork from Mariana Ignazi in this comic. It feels very of a nod to some of the Tim Sale stuff we've seen on Catwoman, very much of a nod to her Brubaker series in the 2000s. So if you're more in it for art than story, I do think this will continue hitting for you. I think Torren Grunbeck has a fantastic voice for Selena Kyle. This story, I'm losing its shape. There's this mob family that she was involved in. They didn't know she was Catwoman. She was undercover at the time. They did some bad stuff, but then there's another person doing bad stuff. So they made it to Tokyo. So she plays them against each other so they could steal a thing. It does give me a little bit of a satisfaction of heisty Catwoman, which is what I want from Catwoman. But this story, it's just got so many steps in it. And I'm not saying I don't like a complex story. I'm saying I'm losing the Catwoman of it. I'm losing her motivation. I'm losing her agency. It feels like she's going to the next location because she has to go to the next location because the next location is the place she needs to go to advance the story. Is she trying to get revenge? Is she trying to... I don't know. I'm losing that. And that's, even though I like the writing and I like the art a lot, it's really keeping me at arm's distance because it's not keeping me close to Catwoman, even though she gets to narrate and there's narration of her thoughts, which should let me get pretty close to her. I'm just not feeling it. So I'm not coming out against this book and I'm still very much rooting for it, but we're like 6 issues deep into this arc right now and it's just not quite hitting. Challenges of the Unknown is hitting for me, though, and this is issue number 4 of, I believe, 5. Christopher Cantwell came up with such a great little mystery box here where the box gets opened enough every issue to give you a peek inside that you just feel satisfied every issue. It's not one big ongoing mystery. You could almost read these 4 issues in any order. The art is by a variety of different artists in every issue, and this one, Sean Isaac and Amanke Nalpan, both of who are incredible, as colored from Romulo Fajardo Jr., letters from Hassan Otsman Elio. And I really like this trope that it has, that it has a recap page, which I wish DC would do more because I'm old and stupid. It's not just because I read 60 plus books a week. It's that I just want to be reminded what you thought was important about the story. But the recap page is told from the perspective of Mr. Terrific, which makes it kind of in-story material because he's not really in the story. He's observing the story. So this week we get another Challenger of the Unknown. He's their, top pilot, and he goes to this asteroid with Green Lantern to explore why it might have Darkseid energy. And in the asteroid, they find some really creepy stuff. It's a really well-written character piece. I don't know the Challengers. I've never read any Challenger stuff so far, but I felt like it let me get really, really close to this character. And also it kind of let me get close to Hal Jordan, who I am on the record of hating, but I thought he was fine in this issue. He was used well as contrast to the Challengers character. So to take any comic with 2 characters I specifically do not care about and to get me on their side and to make me worried for them and to make me creeped out by something they find, and then to connect that to this greater mystery of what's going on with the Challengers, why do they seem connected to this new dark side energy that's been spread all around the universe after he winked out and unbeknownst to the Justice League is now piloting the Absolute Universe? It just really works for me. I've heard some people that are a little softer on this. I just love it. I think it's a really fun mystery. It's clearly setting up a big, big something for the Justice League. And I think even if that next issue, which I think is the finale, totally misses the mark, I think each one of these 4 issues has been fun enough that I totally would still recommend them to people who either like the Challengers or just want to see some cool JL team up things, because every issue has been one of the League teaming up with one of the Challengers. It's in my top 20. I really like it. And I love Sean Isaac's art, so that is an easy sell for me. This was the final issue of Christmas 365, issue number 4 from Dark Horse Comics, from Mikey Way, Jonathan Rivera, Piotr Kalowski, and Brad Simpson and Joshua Reed. I hated this. And I think the thing is that I like a series that knows what it is and kind of sticks on knowing what it is. And this series, or I want a series that transforms and takes me somewhere revelatory. And this one didn't do either. It's, this dad wants to have Christmas displays outside of his house because he failed his family, but then he's to fight with his boss, and then his boss has Christmas displays too. But then there's a social media influencer that's like Mr. Beast who offers them money to work together because wouldn't that be cool to have a Christmas display? But then he's also doing other things like challenging people to do things within the Christmas display. And then it's too many layers and layers. And this human heart of the story at the beginning that was about this dad who had a terrible relationship with his dad and didn't want to become him, it kind of gets tickled a little in this final issue, but to me it did not pay off. There's like a supernatural element maybe, but it just felt like this it couldn't decide if it was a Looney Tunes book. And that's something I said when I reviewed the first issue on here. It feels very silly, like there's this cartoonish violence aspect of it that happens. It can't decide if it's a Looney Tunes book or a book about this family and their personal struggle. And I think ultimately it did a disservice to both sides because it couldn't decide what it was. There were moments in this issue 4 that felt like they should have been very satisfying and personal, but they just weren't given enough space to breathe. I still think this had a great concept, but unfortunately I can't recommend this series because I think it just totally missed the mark on its final issue, unfortunately. Now we come to Conan the Barbarian. This is actually an interesting place that you could just jump in here with this issue because, and of course I got a version of the cover that doesn't have the issue number on it, because I think that this issue really kind of, even though it's part 3 of his story, it's Conan as a stranger in a strange land and he's exploring it. We don't know why he's there. He doesn't know how he can get out of there. And it's really just a travelogue issue with Jim Zub writing. He writes this whole run and truly, truly gorgeous art from Doug Braithwaite with colors from Diego Rodriguez. I mean, just made me gasp on every page. It's a really, really beautiful story. Not a lot happens. You have to be willing to just watch Conan wander. But the thing that makes it work is Zub writes such a good narration of Conan that you really can just watch Conan wandering through the woods. And it's that compelling because Zub is so good at it. And there are hints at how this ties into the bigger narrative, but I don't even think you need those hints. I think it was such a satisfying, gorgeous, fun to read issue that after some issues that the art was like just okay, and I come to this book to be like an art showcase and a story showcase, I was really satisfied with this because for me, it did both. I didn't read Critter number 7 from the Antarctic Press Superverse, although maybe one day I'll get there now that I'm reading 60 other books. Saying the internet's slow. Are we getting slow internet? I don't know. Nobody's actually talking to me. All right, we need to maybe we'll just take our break here. We're only in the Syze. But am I seeming slow? Wouldn't it be awful if I've just been talking this whole time and you can't even hear me? That would be terrible. Nobody said anything yet. Everything's working. Okay, I'm just going to ignore it then. I'm going to keep my eye in the chat. Tell me if I start getting slow and kind of broken up. And then we will investigate. But since it's working for all of you, I'm not going to change it that much. This is Crush Depth, a new comic from Mad Cave, Crush Depth number 1. It's written by David D.B. Andry and Tim Daniel with art from Alex Sanchez. Really amazing colors from Kurt and Michael Russell. Letters from Justin Birch. First, let's start with the look of this comic. Friggin' gorgeous. Doesn't look like anything else in the stands right now. Just pages I could linger and linger and linger on. I don't know how to explain the style of art. The style that gets so close up on people's face and their face. I know she's got liquid on her face, but also her features themselves look somewhat liquid. And that's a style all throughout this. I think it's because it's not super heavily inked. So you can kind of see some of the pencil quality beneath it. I could read a comic that looks like this forever. I do think it occasionally had some trouble showing movement through the space. And especially for a book that's about a submarine that's at this crush depth, that's really important. And there were points that there was submarine action that I just totally could not figure out what was going on. So that really took me out of it a little. Also, they talk about how they haven't seen humans forever. They're underwater, but then they're bartering with eggs. I'm like, where are you getting these eggs? If you've been underwater and have no country, you have chickens? I didn't see any chickens. I'm willing to hand wave that away because it's the first issue. I'm sure they're going to tell us where they got the eggs and the cream cheese to make this cake. But some of the action with the submarine that I just could not follow, and I was not reading fast. I think I spent like 20 minutes on this issue. I just could not figure out what was going on. They launch a mini sub. Anyway, I saw a lot of people like this. I think there's something really special. I think the art is incredible. And I'm willing to read another issue because if issue 1 didn't totally click, it's outrageously good enough that some of those non-clicking things maybe can get fixed. I love a lockbox mystery. There's no box more locked than a submarine deep, deep under the sea. I love that there's maybe, is there giant monsters? Is there a plague? What is happening up on dry land? Why do they have a hope still that they're going to find soil? And how do they think they're going to live forever in the submarine? I'm interested in all of these things. It has a heavy vibe of the first Alien movie. It's very much that kind of locked room suspense. So it's something I'm very, very much into. That said, I have read other Vault comic series, I believe, from DB Andre that I did not find the ending satisfying. So I'm girding my loins that the ending just might not be good. But again, it was really cool. The art was so unique. I definitely will read it again next month. This is Daredevil Unleash Hell. Oh, and apparently, alert, 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 you can read Crush Depth right now on Global Comics if you are subscribed to Global Comics. I'm not being funded by Global Comics anyway. Global Comics, get at me. But for $7.99 a month, you can read unlimited books. And this is one of them. We're going to come up into another one and a few more letters, and that would have paid for itself for the month. And that's just 1 week. Let me get through one more letter, and then maybe we'll take a little mini break, okay? So let's talk about, well, I didn't get to read Daredevil Unleash Hell because it's a red band book. I do love that cover, though, with Lady Muse versus Elektra as Daredevil. Just beautiful, beautiful cover. But I'm looking forward to reading to it when it's collected in trade paperback. This is Dark Empty Void. Dark Empty Void is by Zach Kaplan, writer, Chris Sheehan, artist, Francesco Segala, colorist, and Agnese Pose flats on those colors with Justin Birch as letterer. So the whole concept of this book is there's an artificial black hole that they've created in the science facility, and something comes out, a young woman, and they can't figure out how to communicate with her or what to communicate with her. And the black hole is rapidly expanding. So they bring in the NASA scientists, X, who happens to be a doctorate of psychology, to try to negotiate with this woman. The human aspect of this is really, really perfect. Like it really nails what I would want from a story with a human aspect. If you've ever seen the movie Arrival with Amy Adams, and how great the human aspect of her story plays into the story of what is going on with the things that arrive, this has that quality to it. Unfortunately, a lot of last issue and this issue are just them floating around in this room with this black hole. And much like Crush Depth, actually, also from Mad Cave, I think it has a lot of trouble showing us movement on every axis. It's not just showing us moving on 2 axes, but a third, a Z axis, up and down and back and forth through space. And I just think there's a lot of points, like even this page, I know intellectually there's a blast. She gets fired away from the blast. Somebody down on the ground is putting their hand up in front of their face and seeing her float away. And then we're getting closer to what is obviously that same figure floating away. It's really hard to track where the hand comes from based on the panel beforehand. And that really threw me off. And I had to sit and look at it. And I figured it out. And I think it's fine to have a comic that makes you look at it and eventually figure it out. But I just don't know if Chris Sheehan, I don't know if people floating around unmoored through space in this room with no geography is putting his art talents to the best use. And he definitely has art talents. If you like that kind of story like Arrival, I do think this book will hit for you. And hardly anybody is as outrageously picky about art and geography and art as I am. I think it's ultimately pretty strong. And I think it's really doing an interesting thing, telling this personal story inside of this sci-fi story. Y'all, I was going to skip this because I don't read DC Elseworlds. So when I saw Sonic the Hedgehog X DC X Sonic the Hedgehog, I was like, I don't friggin' care. Well, enough people posted enough panels of it and talked enough about it that I read it. It's by Ian Flynn, writing, who I think writes a lot of Sonic, with Adam Bryce Thomas on art, Matt Herms on colors, and Becca Carey, who I love in letters. I did the unusual thing here, I believe, if I built this PDF the way I remember I built it, with showing the credits page. As soon as I saw this page, I was in. That's Darkseid's little floating castle. I love how it immediately feels like part of Sonic's world. It's so absurdly funny, but also scary as it would be scary to Sonic, coming out of this giant vortex, and it's Darkseid, but it's Darkseid, and it's just a head. I'm like, okay, I'm buying this comic. I'm reading it. The art on the Sonic stuff is so perfect. They feel like a cartoon that's moving right in front of me. But then the DC heroes look great too. And there's this hilarious sequence where basically each of the heroes meets up with each of their Sonic characters. And then later they all kind of fan out with each of their Sonic characters. And it's adorable. I think it gets all of the Justice League really right. I haven't played a Sonic game since the original Sonic on Game Gear, which I probably still have somewhere in this house. I have no idea what Sonic lores are. I don't know who Knuckles or Tails. I don't know who any of these people are other than just through memes, right? I thought that this was hilarious, adorable and beautiful. So if you have any love for Sonic, I think it will hit for you because it hit for me and I don't even care. I dropped Deadly Tales of the Gunslinger. It is too much predicated on violence towards women. I think Jimmy Palmiotti is talented enough to tell other kinds of stories. If he's always going to have to kill women to titillate us or to make Gunslinger Swan feel something, maybe it's time for him to take a break from comics and address those issues somewhere else in his life. I refuse to continue to review it. Even though I'm on my Spawn bullshit. I want to talk about Spawn, but I'm not going there. All right, let's finish the D's and then we'll do a mini chat break. This is Deadpool and Wolverine, issue number 3 from Ben Percy, Joshua Cassara, and Guru EFX on colors with letters from Joe Sabino. It just looked so good. One of my concerns with the last issue is Joshua Cassara getting too glossy? Is he getting too Marvel House style? I like all the lines on his art. I like how dirty it looks. And I actually like a Deadpool book that's not afraid to get a little bit dirty in the line art. I liked Nick Klein on Deadpool back in 2018. This has got it, man. I could not stop looking at this. And Guru EFX, personally, I would love Dean White coloring Joshua Cassara, but Guru EFX is really good here. And I just really appreciated it. On the story side, it's just a fight. It's just a fight between Wolverine and Deadpool. There's no way in good conscience I can tell you to spend $4 or $5 on this right now and to read it because it is just a knockdown, drag out fight. But boy, does it look good. Am I really interested in bringing Strife back right now? No, sir, I am not. Am I really interested in having some kind of Legacy Virus 2.0, which this hints at? Absolutely, absolutely hell no. But it's a very good looking book. I still hate how Benjamin Percy writes Wolverine, but he writes a really good Deadpool. And they're two characters that I would love to see a long running team up book. I bet it can get past 10 issues, Tom Brevoort. So I will keep reading it. It's not a heavy recommendation for me, though, unfortunately. I read, oh, by the way, Guru EFX, who's the colorist here, it's somebody's name. Hey, my name's Krisis, so name yourself whatever you want. For some reason, every week after I do this video, if I've mentioned them, they're the only person that comes up in that little YouTube thing of like famous people mentioned in this video. Only Guru EFX, not Brian Michael Bendis, not Kelly Sue DeConnick, not Kelly Thompson, not Jed McKay, just Guru EFX. So you know what? Whoever's doing your PR, you got working hard. I don't even know how that works. I should because I work in digital advertising. I don't know why some people's mentions turns up and on other people's don't. Okay. Defenders of the Earth, I read the first issue of this from Mad Cave. It's written by Dan Didio. I thought it was clearly it can't be in the same continuity as the current Flash comic, Flash Gordon, because he's on the Defenders of the Earth and he's like far flung in space right now. But I thought maybe it would tell a story from just before that or earlier in continuity. No, it's telling a completely different continuity story. And I read the first issue and I just couldn't get into it. So I'm just going to stick with Flash Gordon. And I mean, the Defenders of the Earth is this loosely associated group of pulp heroes and includes the Phantom and some other ones. I actually, thinking back, had all of their toys as a kid, but it just really didn't hit for me. So I am not reading it. However, first, I'm not even starting the timer yet. Look at this cover. It's just so gorgeous. It is Yanim, by the way, who is the series artist on the cover. I just love how there's no true black. Like everything is using the interplay between red and green, except for in the center of his cowl to create the darkness because they're complementary colors. It's one of my favorite Batman covers of all time. I can't stop looking at it. But this story, now we're going to start the clock, by Tom Taylor. I loved it so much. I loved it so much because it's getting into a Batman who is struggling to decide how to handle a problem because the problem's got him backed into a corner. He did the whole, I'm going to be rich Bruce Wayne and infiltrate a situation that I can't infiltrate as Batman. But now that means he is embroiled in this situation, which he feels the need to expose because of what Damian uncovered last issue, in an issue that I absolutely loved. And Clark comes to him to be like, are you okay? Because Bruce is like locked in. There's this great bit. I'll spoil it for you because I thought it was so funny. But on this page, it says movement detected at Matter entrance. Bruce, ignore. Entrance gate pressure detected. How much pressure? 1 ton. Increased security resistance. Pressure at 3 tons. 8 tons. Front gate pressure at 23 tons. Damn it. Preparing countermeasures, negative, cancel countermeasures, activate front speaker. And I was like, why? Oh my gosh, what's happening? No, it's Superman knocking on the door. That's hilarious, Tom Taylor. This book, I lack, I think, the full vocabulary to tell you how much I love about it. It not only embroils him in the situation, but it's connected to Joe Chill. And that's where it's going to lose some people. Some people are going to be like, stop with the retconning. I don't need every story to tinker with Batman's origin. But the thing about this is, I don't want to spoil it. It doesn't tinker. It introduces one old character, old new character that does have a connection to Joe Chill. But the question it's asking is, even if that's true, does it fundamentally change what you know and what you think about Batman? And it's not trying to answer that question right now. It's just trying to make you ask yourself the question if it fundamentally changes what you think about Batman. I think that's rhetorically brilliant. I think Tom Taylor is writing an excellent Batman, an excellent Damian, and this is one of my top 10 favorite books in comics. I think it is absolutely brilliant. And of course, we cannot overlook the art from Yanin here, especially because it looks a little different, because it is inked by Norm Rapund at points and also Alex Guimarães on colors. Sometimes Yanin handles all of it himself, and I think it looked compelling to me, but I liked the shift. It was like a little bit more personable, a little bit less fantastical than when he handles all of it himself. I mean, this was perfect. To me, this was a perfect issue of a perfect comic book. Absolutely love this arc. Recommend jumping into it when DC All In began. It is really, really hooking me. We have one more D, multiple, and then the big D, which I skipped, so we won't have to talk about that. Let's talk about the Deviant. This was the final issue of a 9-issue series. This one really got me, y'all. I really don't even know how to talk about it. It's a queer horror story. And the horror story is that there's this mall Santa, or maybe he's the manager of the anyway, who was gay in the 1970s and had done some criminal things. But he gets accused of killing these kids that were the elves in Santa's workshop because he was obsessed with them. And he may have been obsessed with them, but did he kill them? So now we're in the modern day, and this gay journalist, or maybe he's a comic book writer, and he's writing an autobiographical, but also about other things in real life comic book. And he's trying to connect with this murderer because he's heard his story his whole life. But not only that, when he was growing up, one of the only stories about somebody queer in the media was about this killer. And that's a real life thing. I mean, if you grew up queer or questioning in the 1960s or 70s or 80s or 90s, a lot of times the only other queer people that would be in media were monsters that were made into monsters by the media, who maybe also did bad things. And that was just happened to be the thing that was being reported on. I'm not saying it was universal, but I remember that. And James Tynion brings it to such a conclusion here. It doesn't answer every question, but it answers enough of the questions. And it really made me feel things, really like troubling things. This was not, it was gory, but the reason it challenged me wasn't that it was gory. It made me really like look into my own past and the people that I identified with as a kid, and things that made me feel othered as a kid, and the things I would have done to not feel other, or to connect with somebody who I thought was an other like me. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Every issue was great. Joshua Hickson's art was incredible. It's one of the best comics I've read. If I had been reading this throughout last year, this would have been in my top 10 last year. I'm sorry I didn't do an interior page. A lot of it was spoilery of what the outcome is. This is a perfect suspense comic book. And it is deeply queer, and it makes no apologies for that. And I don't know how it's going to read for somebody who doesn't have any kind of affinity or identity tied up in being LGBTQ. I don't know. So you'll have to tell me if you read it. But I saw a lot of people who loved it, and I don't think they were all queer. So I think it might also just be a really good book. But it really, 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 really got me in a really unexpected way. And then Dick Tracy, I dropped. I was just too angry about how slow and boring it is. For something that's based on comic strips, I want it to pop. I want every issue to feel significant. And it just was not getting there. And I can't, after 7 issues, I just can't keep reading it. But oh my gosh, we're still in the D's. I want to take a break. So this is Giant Size Dreamweaver Special. Dreamweaver Giant Size Special from Chris Ryall, illustrated by Nelson Daniel, lettered by Ian Chalgren. This did a really interesting thing in that it brought us in the middle of the story with an old superhero. He's old. He's rickety. He's got this magic spark in him that lets him change reality around him to a degree and do all these unreal things, but he's tired, and maybe he's not the best person for the spark. Maybe it's time he finally gave up the spark. I loved it because we don't really have a lot of characters who are elderly superhero characters, and it made me fully understand him and fall in love with him so quickly that I really, really got it. And I was rooting for him, but I also was appreciating why he needed to maybe move on. It really, really hooked me. But then it's really long. It's like 50 or 60 pages. Then it moves on to him training this person who I guess he's going to give his powers to. It kind of doesn't go how he planned it. That just felt so anonymous. It felt like 100 comics I've read already. It lacked perspective entirely. by the end of the issue, it kind of comes back around and gets to a place where we're in an interesting situation. There is a little bit of perspective there, but I just think the story was of this old guy and why he has this power, and the younger hero who gets the power just felt really bland to me. Like it didn't feel as special as the old guy. And so would I keep reading? I don't know. I don't know if this is going anywhere. It did have it to be continued, but it's just a debut giant size special. I don't know if I can recommend it. I really need to see what would happen in the next couple issues, and if that newer hero feels significant and interesting enough to me that it's not just an interesting setup, but an interesting story. Also, it was R-rated, which, you know, maybe appeals to you or maybe doesn't, in ways that didn't feel necessary. I'm always like, if there's a book that's totally PG-13 and then somebody curses, or then somebody takes their top off, or then somebody's full frontal, I'm like, did that contribute to the story, or did you just do it so you could say that your comic was R-rated? Anyway, okay, we finally got out of the D's. So I do need a little sip of some kind of liquid, which hopefully I brought up here with me. I did. And also, I'm sure you have made so many comments. I'm not going to be able to get every single one, but let's see. Okay. Going back quite a ways. John Parles, why did Claremont write Team America and New Mutants? What was he thinking? Well, at the time, the line between Marvel licensed properties and characters and Marvel official characters, which was much more permeable. So like he wasn't thinking, they were just another set of characters he could use. Like it wasn't, I think we now make it out to be a bigger deal, but at the time it was like, use Team America, use Godzilla, use the Micronauts, use all of the pencils in the pencil case. Oh, we already did that one. Okay. A Fifth of Jack Gaming enjoys my insight on books. I have to say I'm 2 volumes deep on Phoenix Omnibus. Should I grab the third? If you really want the complete story of Jean Grey in your bookshelf, I mean, the third one is all of the modern Jean Grey stuff. And especially if you don't have all of X-Men from the 2000s and 2010s, it's going to help you complete that. But if you've already got new X-Men and you've already got Avengers versus X-Men, I think the things in it to get it for are War Song and End Song, which I wish were going into an Astonishing X-Men companion, maybe one day, but now they're in a different omnibus. And then it's got the return of Jean Grey in it, but then it doesn't have X-Men Red. Yeah, it's just kind of a weird book. It's hard to say if you have to really love Jean Grey and really not have any of that material already, I think is the answer. Did I answer that? Okay, so a couple things I answered here. Looking to start reading some modern Marvel run. Any God of Thunder, Stephen Patterson, my answer is God of Thunder by Jason Aaron and Esad Ribic, starting with God of Thunder #1. And it'll be, I forget if it's labeled 2012 or 2013 in Marvel Unlimited, because it came out at the very, very end of 2012, but it had a 2013 cover date. I think it's Marvel's best story of the past 15 years, and there's tons of it to read. It doesn't cross over into anything until the very, very end, so you can just sit and read it all. If you don't know what order to go in, go to my Thor guide on crushingcrisis.com, and it will tell you everywhere to go. Highest possible recommendation. Still talking about the Phoenix Omnibus. Fifth of Jack Gaming says, I haven't bought the first volume because of your Mint Evergreen stream. Sorry, that was my fault. But the first volume, this is why I recommend the first volume of the Phoenix Omnibus. It has all of the good parts of the Dark Phoenix saga with none of the downtime. There's none of the filler issues. There's none of the other stories. It's the perfect collection of the Dark Phoenix saga. That's why I recommend it. Not everybody wants a sequential shelf of every single Uncanny X-Men issue ever. I do, but you might not. That's the perfect Phoenix book. Volume 2 has some really good Phoenix material in it, but it doesn't rise to the heights of Volume 1. I personally really like Rachel Summers, so Volume 2 works for me. And then Volume 3 is like modern Phoenix and modern Jean Grey. So that's the information with which you will do what you will. Okay. Have I had a character I enjoyed reading about, but reaches the point where you feel their story at one point is conclusive ending? You don't follow them anymore. Yes, George Chimchimov, the X-Men. I think DC tends to do a better job at finding a new reason to re-engage with an old character than Marvel. And maybe that's because DC has rebooted so many times that you never know if all those stories are in continuity. When Marvel reinvents a character lately, or like tries to tell new stories, sometimes it just, the thing that they do just seems so irrelevant that I'm like, I don't even care to follow this. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of characters that I kind of feel like I'm done with that now. I might be getting there with Wonder Woman, honestly. I just think, which is not to say people shouldn't enjoy new Wonder Woman stories, but as somebody who's been reading these stories for decades and who owns all of them, at a point, I do kind of feel like I'm full up sometimes. Yeah. Upping the pledge to $2. Thank you so much, Reaper XC, which I know is more in Australian dollars. Loving my work. Do I think with recent late era Krakoa Omnis that spells hope for the reading order volumes to continue? That's a bigger topic than I can get into here. I do not think the late Krakoa Omnis by creators are a good idea to release right now. They've already released 2 of the 3 flagships, or announced them anyway, the Duggan X-Men Omnibus and the Ewing Omnibus. You know there's going to be a Gillen one. It's coming any minute now. I don't have to have insider information to tell you that it's coming. And that means those are the main 3 things people would buy the Krakoa reading order for. They're the main 3 series. Nobody loved any of the supporting series like they love those. So they've shot themselves in the foot, and I seriously question if they're going to get to 11 volumes on the Krakoa series, and that will affect my decision about if I am going to buy the Dawn of X Volume 1 or not. Javier Hernandez, late hello to you. Spike Stonehand working but chiming into saying you'll watch the replay tomorrow. Thank you so much. Richard fearing if I were going out of town for a great time out, who would be the 4 X folks I would go out with? I want to go out with like Lila Cheney. Let's go backstage. Let's get into all the places, right? I want to go with the people who like clearly know all the places they can go. Lila Cheney, Yukio, right? Like I don't want to be with one of the main X-Men. They're too busy saving the world to have a good time, except for maybe Gambit, but I don't want to hang out with Gambit. I want to hang out with people who like know how to go to cool places, know how to get in the clubs. That would be what would be fun to me. So yeah, I would pick like Lila Cheney, Yukio, I mean, Emma, clearly, because Emma can get in anywhere she wants, and she's only going to go to the most ritzy places. And let's see, I have to pick one more. Who's another fun one? I want Dazzler, right? Yeah, I want to have a good time. Yes, have a music stream. Yes, have guests on Meme. I'm thinking about it, Max. I'm thinking about it. Yeah, a lot of support for this potential music stream. Yeah, well, because I got rid of the duck in the top corner, I now can stream an unlimited amount every month, which I'm not going to abuse my notification privileges. I know that I can only notify you of things a certain number of times per month before you get tired of me. But I do think there might be one more stream every other week, and certainly there's a chance for one of those to be music, but I'm going to start with comic stuff, and then we'll see if I can keep that up, because I'm very time poor. I have very little time. I barely get things done when I need to get them done, so I'm not trying to make it harder. But yes, more people saying music. James Abel on Absolute Batman number 6, it felt anticlimactic. Glad it wasn't just me. We spent 6 issues to get here for it to be over so fast, but I'm looking forward to Mr. Freeze in the next issue. Kroll Angel said, love that now his circle of friends know he's Batman. I guess that is something very different. And of course, the drop kick, but how's Black Mask still alive? Yeah, it seemed like he gouged his eyes out. I thought that was him dying, but then still there. James Abel on Absolute Flash number 1, it was over in a blink of an eye. Art looked great, but the story was all set up. I'm very interested to see where this is going next. Whereas Cruel Angel said, the time jumping was a bit jarring at times, but it's an interesting approach. I'm intrigued enough to see where it all leads. Kane enjoyed the first Adventureman hardback, so honestly, I think if you liked it already, the quality seems like it has stayed pretty high to me. Now, Kane reminded me once again about what Assassin's Apprentice is. Will it stick in my goldfish brain today? Assassin's Apprentice is a novel by Robin Hobb, the first in the Farseer trilogy. Robin Hobb is an epic fantasy author. All right, well, should I read it? Have you read the comics, Kane? Are they good? Reaper reading Tom Brevoort for filth. Brevoort blame sales for everything failing, but maybe they should take a look at the story, art, and purpose of the series. Try selling it to us rather than blaming us for the poor product. Agreed. James Abel on Avengers 24, great artwork. Everything felt natural, and the action flow at great pace. This is how you do 3-issue arc. Take lessons, DC. I think DC is doing okay with short arcs right now. I think everybody can learn a lesson from everybody else. I think these 6-issue arcs are gone at the point that comics are $5 each, and also the point that I think that's another reason things are not lasting to 10 issues. People start reading an arc and like there's no satisfaction after 2 issues, 3 issues, 4 issues. They're like, I'm not going to keep reading this. You got to satisfy people. So I think if comics more often did shorter arcs that were satisfying, people would not see that as a dropping point. I personally think that people would see this as a keep reading point because they felt so great at it. Okay, let's keep going. Omnibo, my Australian friend. Hello, everyone. I have this on mute because boss is here. I'll have to listen to my wonderful voice speaking at top speed a little bit later in the day. Let's see. Batman and Robin Year 1. Cruel Angel says, nice to see Bruce finally start to realize that Robin may be impulsive, but he's more skilled and competent than Bruce initially thought. I love at the end where Bruce said, are you going to tell me how to walk on a tightrope? Because he saw Robin do that and Bruce doesn't know. Like that to me are those moments that make me love a Year 1 book where like, it's not the origin of why Batman knows how to tightrope walk. It's just these moments that you know in your mind had to have happened between these two characters, and it lets you explore why they happened. I think that's a good use of a rear one. One Wheelchair X is a friend of the channel. He is on the Friends of Crushing Crisis channel strip on the channel homepage. Hello to Crisis and Co. Been a few weeks, but finally got the time to join the stream this time. Hope everyone is doing well. I hope you're doing well as well. I still hope that I get to do some kind of streaming with One Wheelchair X at some point this year. Bug Wars number 2, James Abel. Moral of the story: don't mow your own yard. Hire someone, or else if you cut it yourself, you'll make some enemies who have a blood vendetta against you and your lawnmower and burn you in effigy. Ryan Wilson hasn't read World's Finest since issue 25. Yeah, just I don't know. It's not for me. It's for some reader who's really, really liking it. That reader is not me. Bug Wars is great. I just don't think number 2 was as good as initial. Oh, Exit City, Reaper says, apparently is combining 2 other books in that I forgot what the verse is called. The something verse, the London verse, because they're written by Mark London. That's cool. I will absolutely keep reading it. And the epilogue hinted at that. But there you go. It is obvious that I don't read solicits. Let's see. What did Brevoort have to do with Local Man? Did I miss something? Oh, Darth Twinkie. I was being ADHD and connecting 8 different topics there. Local Man by Tim Seeley and Tony Fleeks ran for like 15 issues and a couple of one-shots, was hugely critically acclaimed. And then it got canceled because the sales couldn't support it. But my point is they got it past issue 10, even though it was an indie book, even though it was something that was like not tied to any franchise. So it was both a joke about Brevoort being like, it's hard, you can't expect books to get past 10, or I'm like, if they could do it with this totally made up new character, you could do it with X-Force Tom Brevoort. But then also making a joke at the expense of Blood Squad 7 to be like, you're not as good as Local Man. So always happy to explain the jokes. No, James, do not. I always forget if slander is written or libel is written. But don't lie slander Max. Max hated that Cable issue. Cable changed your life, says Captain Underpants. Why did it make you change your underpants? I don't understand. How could it have changed your life? Max Albleman saying Cable upsets him. James Abel, Catwoman 74. I'm ready for this arc to be over with. Me too. I'm enjoying it, but not as much as happening. I feel back and forth with it. Yeah, I agree. It had so much cool energy to begin with, and it just doesn't seem like it. At some point you got to satisfy us and cut the thread and start a new one. Okay. Continuity burden is weighing down Grombeck's storytelling for Catwoman. The editor needs to back off and let her strut. Yeah, I'd agree with that too. I think that the first couple of issues were so stylish and it's so much cool narration that I really loved. And now it just feels like it's so busy with the business of like justifying who all these mob people are and their relationship to each other that I've totally lost what was fun about it to start. Yeah. Okay, some people agreeing with me. Everybody's saying that I'm not slow. James Abel, Crush Depth number 1. This is aliens but set underwater, deep in the bottom of the ocean. The Absolution, the submarine Leanna Pearson and her team come across and can change the world. Yeah, I thought it was really, really interesting. I'm definitely potentially interested in it. Feels like aliens and Waterworld mixed together, says Kane. Waterworld, an absurd movie, but a really cool concept. I actually have a song that's kind of about Waterworld. I have not rehearsed it. Maybe I'll play that for a future week. Upcoming, Richard Fearing saying, and getting that Ultimate Spider-Man on this. I mean, I don't collect any Ultimate Universe stuff physically. I think it's interesting that they put Team Up in the Ultimate Spider-Man Omnibus because Ultimate Team Up was from so much earlier in the Ultimate Universe. And I know that they missed it, but I think we all thought there would be an Ultimate Companion and that maybe they could call it Ultimate Team Up because it would have all those other like short books in it and it would be headlined by Ultimate Team Up, which people would want, but then they could stuff in all those other books. So I think it's kind of weird that they're doing it that way. Electrix Alpha, hello. What's an X-Men omnibus I want that hasn't been done? Obviously the Messiah Complex era. I think that Matt Fraction era is the one I want the most. And of course, Chuck Austin. I'm not joking. I would like to just have all of Chuck Austin in one. We now have Extreme in omnibus. Oh gosh, things are flying off the shelves. We have it. I haven't even opened yet, but I've clearly read it before. And we have new X-Men in omnibus. We need the third leg of that X-Men stool from that period, which was Chuck Austin. James Abel, DC versus Sonic the Hedgehog was super adorable. Amazing job. This shows how you do a proper IP crossover. I agree. I knew who everybody was. DC Sonic was rad. Yeah, people really, really seemed to dig it. All right, y'all. I cannot possibly catch up with all this, but also happy birthday to Max, friend of the channel. Go listen to him play music. Go wish him a happy birthday. Go subscribe to his channel. He has 190 subscribers right now. What if he had 200 by the time this was over? Could 10 of you find your way over to Max's channel, Max Appleman on YouTube? He's in my Friends of Crushing Crisis channel, so it'd be very easy to find and subscribe. That would be really cool. Very nice for Birthday, Super Banda saying, I love these streams so much. I wish it could be for the whole thing, but always got to check in. Have a great day. Insert name that we decide to call ourselves. The Crushtastic fans. I don't know. We're always workshopping. Okay. So many of you, I see you continuing to leave amazing comments, but we do need to keep it pumping, as I like to say. So now we come to Eddie Brock, Carnage. This was the book that I had to leave out of my top 12. It was I think this was 13. Avengers Academy was 14. It's really good. Charles Soule, Jesus Syze, colors from Matt Hollingsworth. I just love the concept. Here's what's working. Eddie Brock is with Carnage. That doesn't make sense. Why are they together? Because it's the only way Eddie Brock feels like he can keep an eye on Carnage. And Carnage is happy because he thinks he can corrupt Eddie Brock. So it's a match made in hell. But so far, these first two issues have been one-shots. The first issue is this locked box story of them on a plane. There's a murder on the plane. Eddie Brock has agreed to let Carnage kill the murderer, but how are they going to figure out who it is and how they're going to get off the plane? Great issue. This issue is another locked box story, and I think that it works because of the tension of Carnage in a locked box. Eddie Brock is being interrogated. He wanted to be interrogated. He walks himself into a police station. What's his plan? What does he want to let Carnage do? Why does he only want to be interrogated by this certain police officer? It really, really works. It continues the story from the first issue, but it deepens the mystery of what is going on with the symbiote here, and also what Eddie Brock's plan is and how they're playing chess against each other in Eddie Brock's mind. Eddie Brock wants to find a way ultimately to please the symbiote by just killing horrible people, which is something he would have tried to do as Venom anyway, but with the suit that was a little bit more complicit and compliant. But Eddie Brock wants to either Carnage wants to either turn Eddie Brock into a serial killer or to be let loose to merge with one of the serial killers so he can get back on his murdering streak that he was on with Cleves Cassidy. I don't think you have to love Carnage to love this. I think it's just a good, tense, scary book set in the Marvel Universe, and I love when people use Carnage to do that. I'm not reading this EC's Epitaphs from the Abyss, which is a anthology comic from Omni Press, who's doing things in the story of style of EC. Now we come to Exceptional X-Men, which is another thing that a lot of Brevoort's newsletter I was reading from was about this book. This is by Eve Ewing, art from Carmen Carnero, colors from Nolan Woodard, letters from Travis Lanham. First, I got to start with the art. Carmen Carnero, I had a little bit of a critique last month that it felt like she wasn't painting with pencils as much as she used to, because that's that Gene Colan quality I love of her art. I take it back, because this issue, it's just, to get me to read a single Marvel issue for like 12 plus minutes is hard because they read real fast and they're real decompressed. I lingered on every page, especially this page of Emma getting ready to go out in the town with me because she was one of the people I decided I would want to go out with. Loved it. But just every page of the art was really great. And I felt like the story moved along. I feel like Eve Ewing has been a little bit mired and kind of just giving us one moment with one of these kids in training. But this issue kind of felt like the whole plot moved along. It's funny that it got the X-Manhunt thing on the cover, because the only thing it had to do with X-Manhunt is Iceman coming in and saying, Xavier escaped, jazz hands. That was the only mention. Also, I hate this tickler on the cover. I won't even say what I clearly know this to be, because I don't even think it should have been tickled, but this issue looked really good. It was really satisfying. And even though I do feel like a lot of this plot has been done verbatim before, it's really, really well made. I do think it's really satisfying. I think it is a New Mutants book. I think it's gorgeous. I think it's voiced very well. I think of all the new characters invented across all of the X-Men books and From the Ashes, it's these three characters, Axo, Melee, and Bronze, who are the most interesting. So I'm still very much on board and in support of this book. But I do think we're now on issue number, what was this? 7. I don't feel like one whole thing has happened yet, but it kind of works here because they are kind of one-off issues and they feel slice of life. But again, it's really dangerous to not do any rewarding of the readers with something that wraps up and to be heading into issue 8. Same problem as Blood Squad 7. I would say this is a problem with any book. It's not exclusive to X-Men. You got to take us somewhere eventually. Then we come to Exciting Comics from Archaic Press. Congratulations on making it to 50. Tom Brevoort said it couldn't be done, but I'm not reading this particular series. Next, we come to this book. This looks cool to me. It looks like a wrestling book or maybe a kung fu book from Parts Unknown. but it's called Pesto Comics, and I just love the coloring and the align work. So I did kind of mean to take a look for this, but after I got past 60, I was like, my eyes are done. This eye is so bloodshot right now. I don't know if you can see it in super HD, but I just did so much reading that I was like, no, I'm not going to chase down every single thing that looks intriguing, including this, which I just love this Ghost Man. He's a ghost and he has a semi-automatic weapon, but it's got a silencer on it, I think. I don't know really anything about guns. That to me looked charming. In a week with less comics, I might have done more to hunt it down. Let me know if it's on Global Comics. I'll absolutely go read it. G.I. Joe. Oh, F yes. I've been a little soft on this main G.I. Joe series for this reason. I feel like Cobra is so much more toyetic than G.I. Joe. They're so much more evocative. They're so much more iconic that a bunch of G.I. Joes arguing with each other and being shot at by Cobra, I intuitively want to root for Cobra because they look more toyetic than the heroes, right? This, I think, fixes it by finally letting the G.I. Joes kind of be action heroes in a way to me that felt a little toyetic, and Tom Riley with Jordi Belair on color just going off on drawing Destro and all of these Vipers, and just it really was the first issue of this young series to me, and it's fine because we're only on issue number 5. Great time to do this. That felt completely satisfying and does all of the G.I. Joe stuff from a counterterrorism angle, from a toy angle, from a sci-fi angle. It's the first one that completely satisfied me. So I think it's a great time. I keep thinking there's another page. That's why I keep going to Grim Fairy Tales. It's a great time to do that. I think Joshua Williamson got out of his zone where he just kind of dashes off each issue and some of them don't feel significant. This felt significant. I love the story. I love the violence. It just felt like a really good G.I. Joe story, and it really made me excited to be in this universe. By the way, one of the guides I just secretly debuted to patrons, they don't know yet because I haven't posted to them, but it already exists, is a guide to the Energon universe. It has all of Void Rivals, Transformers, and G.I. Joe in it. It's not linked from anywhere on the site other than from my newest image post. Maybe we'll take a look at it a little bit later, but I'll formally debut it to you next week. And it is made with the support of patrons, and patrons at the $2 level and up can access it. We'll talk more about Patreon a little bit later. So this Grim Fairy Tales, I almost skipped it because it said it was a pinup issue. And I was like, for real, y'all? For real? Are we really doing this? But then I realized, because I was looking at the preview pages, it had story. And so I'd already made my credits PDF. So I just put the credits in here so I could actually read them during the show. It's story by Joe Bruscia and Dave Francini, and artwork from Rodrigo Xavier, colors from Max Flan Araggio, and letters from Taylor Esposito. It was kind of just a recap-y story. It's this old dude outside of time and space who's kind of just explaining what the Xenoscope universe is and how it works and like his intents for it, which actually is fine because it's nice to have a little reorientation sometimes. And also they know a lot of people are just going to buy the pinup book for all the pinups. So like, why not introduce them a little bit? The story's nothing to write home about, and it's not going to affect you if you haven't read it. But I do sincerely love the Grim Fairy Tales universe. So it's great. But then everybody always talks about how this Grim Fairy Tales is so cheesecakey. This is the 20-year anniversary special. Maybe, I guess I should have started the timer. Oh, well. Maybe for the first 10 years, it was super cheesecakey. I just don't feel like it is like that interior anymore. But then when they do ones like this, yeah, they live up to the reputation. People are still going to think it's all cheesecake all the time. Some of them are way more explicit than this. I thought this was pretty cool because it really just looks like a pretty badass, powerful woman who happens to be in lingerie in the middle of a forest. This artwork by Riviero and colors by Cecily de la Cruz. It's really, really cool. Really, really good. Not all the pinups are of that quality. And I bought it because I'm a freak and I like Grim Fairy Tales continuity. I don't think the pinups are worth buying it unless you really like that kind of thing. I did not read the Heat Seeker Combustion from Hardcase. However, I did read the Herculoids, and this is going to be a drop for me because, well, let me start the timer. This is the Herculoids #2, written by Tom Shnigowski, who I love, and Craig Rosso on art, with colors from Omi Ramolante Jr. and letters from Jeff Eckelberry. The thing about this for me is it completed the story. It completed this very toyetic story of this Hanna-Barbera cartoon. I learned after the show last time that the original designs were by Alec Roth, which is amazing. And it kind of like shows them defending their land. It's like a Savage Land story. There's alien invaders that want the resources, and the Herculoids beat them off. Well, they don't. Well, it's great. It's cute. It's fun. It ended. I don't feel the need to read anything else about this planet. None of the characters were made indelible enough to me that I want to see what things they continue to do. I just felt like the whole concept fully explained itself in these 2 issues, which were fine, I guess. And there's just no hook really there. Also, it does that thing when people get small that it doesn't put faces on them. This is not so far away that you could not have drawn a face. And that is a huge turnoff to me in art. It makes me think that you think that I'm not going to linger on your art when I am very much lingering on your art. So this one's a drop for me. It was cute. I think if you have fond memories of the cartoon, which some people on the stream last time said that they did, maybe check it out, but it doesn't feel like there's that much there to me. But you know who's there right now? It's Jeff. Jeff is there. It's a new run of It's Jeff digital comics from Kelly Thompson and Gurihiru. This is issue 43. They're all available to read on Marvel Unlimited. They take about a minute to read each. These are basically 10-panel comics that just tell a quick joke, but they're so adorable. I mean, nobody sells adorable the way Gurihiru does. And this one is actually, I found it really funny. Jeff decides that he wants to learn how to play video games, which is funny because he's in Marvel Rivals right now, and that's why he's having a new resurgence of popularity. But he's just a little baby shark, and he can't play video games, and so he's really bad at them. And it was just cute. It was just cute. It was adorable. I enjoyed it. Okay. Catabasis from Black Box Comics. I really want to keep reading this book. Only issue number 1 is on Global Comics. I reached out to them on Blue Sky to be like, hey, are you going to put more issues on Global Comics? Could I possibly get a copy of issue number 2 or number 3 or number 4 so I can encourage people to go out and buy it physically? Radio silence. I will continue to endeavor because, as a reminder, I absolutely loved the first issue of this book. Now we come to King Spawn. And this, to me, is the main Spawn title. Screw Spawn 1992. It's totally unsatisfying and total gobbledygook. This one is scripted and plotted by Rory McConville, and so it makes sense. And also, Yildiray Sinar's art on this, and actually a few pages of art also from Dudu Pansisica, were incredible. Inks from Julio Ferreira and colors from Ivan Nunes. This one just works for me. Look, if you have fond memories of Spawn, if you love Spawn with all the chains and chasing the demons and going into the sewers instead of just like fighting against angels in like wide open space all the time, if you miss dirty New York sewer, New York alleyway Spawn, this is the comic that he's doing that. And it's just well written, well paced. It was like, I was rooting for Spawn. I wanted to know if he was going to catch the guy. It made me feel tense. And it feels like this is, I understand that Todd's telling the story that he's always wanted to tell with the main Spawn book. This book actually represents why I love Spawn. And the art in this issue was absolutely incredible. So I really, really liked it. To me, King Spawn, if you just want all Spawn with none of the nonsense, King Spawn is the title. You should be reading just this. And this is by the other artist. So this one was by Yildiray Sinar. This one is from the artist that did the final 4 pages, Dudu Pansika. And I just wanted to show you the art was still that good. I mean, this face-to-face of Spawn versus other person, you see the symbiote speckling off of Spawn because it's going to crawl down this guy's eyes and like interrogate his brain. Loved it. I did read LA Strong. This is on Global Comics, although it's a benefit book, so I would encourage you to maybe go get a physical issue or buy it. But Global Comics made clear that they also are donating all of the subscription revenue that comes from the share of people reading it. It's just a lot of California-based creators writing about LA, and what, with 2 exceptions, are just single pages. And they're not stories. It's not like Marvel Comics 1000. It's basically them just writing something they think about California with an artist who maybe illustrated it directly or didn't illustrate it directly. And there were some really great ones. This was my favorite one, by Tilly Bridges and Susan Bridges, art by Sammy Cavella. Jeff Eckleberry letter just about the whole thing. I love this. Just showing the world on fire and all the people, the famous people, the bear with the star, which is of course on the California flag, a firefighter. And it starts with, people in LA don't walk. I walk every day. People in LA are fake. I say hi to the neighbor doing laundry, wave to the woman in the big hat. People in LA only care about themselves. Our neighbors are always giving away food, clothing, toys, and furniture to those who need them. And that's why I really enjoyed, I think, a lot of this book. Even if I didn't recognize the names of all the creators, it was personal. It was autobiographical, and it was about what LA means to them as a city, as a space, as a home, as a living entity in their lives that maybe was the reason that pulled them to California to live to begin with. And it felt very heartfelt in that way. I don't know if there's anything in it that I would say is significant that you've actually got to read, but if you like that kind of look at who these creators are themselves, Steve Orlando wrote a really lovely essay in it. There are just some things I really enjoyed. And I have to shout out to my man, Frank Thierry. I'm often rough on him on this show, but he wrote this really heartfelt little 5 caption box story here that actually really, really brought a tear to my eye. So it turns out Frank Thierry does have a heart. He does not need to get that from the Wizard of Oz. If only he could bring that heart to his Marvel comic book. Sorry, I couldn't let things go. Okay, this is The Last Boy from Boom Studio. It's a Peter Pan story. It's written by Dan Panosian, but he's not on the art, only on the cover, sadly. The art on the inside is by Alicio Avalon, who's fine, colored by Valentina Pinto, with color assistance from Agnes Posa and Rick Mack, and letters by Jeff Eckelberry, who we were just talking about. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like the cover. It's kind of an obvious story. Wendy's an adult back in England. Neverland is still happening. And Neverland, it's fine. Everybody learned their lesson. Captain Hook is trying to go legit and negotiate with the tribes of Neverland. And Peter Pan just can't let it go. Part of being an eternal kid is being eternally in the same status quo and not growing and changing with the people around you. And so he's like, let's duel, Captain Hook. And Captain Hook is like, I have a peace treaty with these people now. We don't duel anymore. I'm an old man. Leave me alone, Peter. I'm sure a lot of these comic book people are watching this show also saying, leave me alone, Peter. But it's fine. I don't know. The Wendy story in the modern day seemed like there was something interesting where she's writing a book, but her mother is telling her, somebody's telling her, like, don't bother publishing it. It just didn't really feel like it went anywhere. Like, I got to the end of the issue and I'm like, okay, Peter's stuck in his status quo and he's an asshole. Neverland changed for the better. Wendy wants to publish a book. It didn't go anywhere. So I don't think it is on Global Comics. So if number 2 shows up next month, maybe since I don't have to spend money on it, I would read number 2, but that's not a good enough reason for me to read a number 2. I just don't think it got me there. I don't think it took me there. Lawful from Greg Pak, which I did start reading and it just wasn't for me. It's about the city where if anybody does anything wrong, they start mutating. Really, really cool concept. It's in this fantastical kind of medieval city. If that sounds cool to you, read the first 2 issues. It just wasn't the pace that I was looking for from a comic book, but Greg Pak's always a fantastic writer. I did read The Loose End number 2 from Hardcase. This one's a drop for me. And I said, coming out of the last issue, when we read the first issue last month, I said, look, I love the idea of this down on his luck writer who gets invited on vacation with his movie star friend. And he's like, oh, I might be able to get to pitch people on this boys club vacation with this producer. But then he gets pulled aside and gets told, actually, we want you're into us for tons of gambling debt. And we want you to kill the producer instead. I said, this could go one of 2 ways. It could be a very Matt Fraction-y, funny, bumbling, ne'er-do-well assassin plot, or it can go the direction of like The Hangover and just be like a total like toxic masculinity. Not even, there's some other movie that's even worse where they all go to Las Vegas and they like kill a sex worker by mistake. I think Jeremy Piven was in it. I just remember seeing it and being like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Well, unfortunately it's that. The art is actually pretty strong and I think the storytelling is pretty strong, but it plays this beat of all the guys that go on the vacation all wear white suits because they're having a bro thing. And the likenesses are not different enough between their haircuts and the one of them wearing a hat that I could tell the difference between them. So I think David Dwatch as the writer and Travis Heimel as the artist kind of shot themselves in the foot here because having them all in this costume made it really interchangeable to me. And also it's about men being the worst version of men that they can be. And I just have zero interest in reading that. I don't care if they all get killed. I don't care how much cocaine they all do. It just makes me bored to see a book that's about like boys being boys. There's enough of that in the real world. I'm no harm to any of you if you enjoy that kind of thing, but I have no interest in reading a comic book about it. I seriously regret buying it. And now we come to Magic, but screw this main title cover from J. Scott Campbell when you've got these backup covers. This one's by Jenny Frison, and this one, I forget the artist, but how is that not your main cover artist? But I know why, because J. Scott Campbell draws great covers. Look, I love Gen 13, and I love J. Scott Campbell back in the day. I do not think he's the right artist to draw Magic. I'm very protective of Ileana. I do not want her to be made sexy. I want her to look badass, and this was not badass. That other cover that I love, by the way, is by Nimit Malavia. This, Ashley Allen is a new writer. She's done some one-off stuff, but this is her first ongoing series. I felt like you could feel it in this issue. She just overwrites this a little bit, but it's in an interesting way. You know, Magic is tracking down this demon master that is causing all of the demon problems on Earth. And he's basically like, look, we don't have to fight. We can be friends, but we've got similar problems. We were granted our demonic powers in similar ways, but I think you should let Darkchild off the chain. I think that's really interesting. I think, of course, Herman Peralta and Arthur Hesley did an amazing job on art. I think the letters were really readable, although Ariana Maher, she did what everybody does in Marvel, which is gives the devils this kind of shaky white on black lettering. I don't think that's the most readable. I think we can let go of some of those old lettering styles sometimes in the sake of readability. But it just felt like Ashley Allen really felt the need to tell us a lot of what was going on between these two people by having them narrate this long conversation between them. Actually, it worked and it was well written. I do think it lent this an air of decompression where it's like, is that all we managed to accomplish is this conversation? It feels like other writers could have handled it more efficiently, but none of it was bad. And I'm still very much rooting for this book. I think it's a pretty high quality book. I do wonder if it's going, and I like that it also has told 3 relatively one-shot stories all linked together. I do wonder if she's going to be able to really make it snappy. The first issue was very snappy. Issue 2 and 3 have not felt as snappy to me, but it's actually pretty good. Oh, again, sorry, I have a page out of order here. This is Miles Morales Spider-Man. It's the final issue of this 4-issue crossover with Deadpool called Pools of Blood. This was just an absolutely phenomenal comic book. I recommend it to any fan of Deadpool, any fan of Miles Morales. It paid off so well. It was so gorgeous. Luigi Zaragia and Zagaria rather, and Brian Valencia on color art just absolutely crushed it. The costumes, the acting, the ability to follow action easily on every page and tell who's kicking who's leaping through the air. Cody Ziegler on the quips from Deadpool, the quips from Ellie, Miles speaking in a voice that's identifiably Miles having a Nazi sitting on his shoulder inside of his brain, telling him what to do and being like, yo man, cool it. I'm trying to have a fight here, but a Nazi, like, you know, he is a trickster god, even though he's a god, kind of like likes vexing Miles a little bit. It just worked. It totally worked and made me love every single character in it. I think this is as good as Miles Morales has ever been in comics, and we're getting close to as good as Deadpool has ever been in comics too in this run. Cody Ziegler has been that good over the past 12 months. Love it, love it, love it. So here's something I read for the first time this week, Mouse Guard. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, I really thought maybe I wanted to just go back and read it all from scratch because it's on my list. I have my huge list of all the things I want to catch up on. And I said, you know what? This is a prelude story. It's set much earlier in continuity than any other Mouse Guard. It's how the origin of this Black Axe. I don't know why it's important because I've never read Mouse Guard. I'm just going to read it. I'm just going to read it and see what I think. And it's in this square format, 8 inches by 8 inches. So that's the format of the book. It's written by David Peterson with art from Gabriel Rodriguez. I loved it. And I don't always love anthropomorphized animal books. So it already had a little bit of a handicap, a wall to get over with me. No, I loved it. And I have trouble telling those characters apart. Sometimes the characters were very easy to tell apart. The Gabriel Rodriguez lays out the story in space so well when they're all talking to each other. And you could see that at the end because he shows his sketches of like the rooms and where people are placed in the room. I love this idea that these mice in this little house, they're just worried about things real mice are worried about. They're worried about a snake. They're worried about actually their whole mouse world is being ringed in by snakes that keep multiplying. And what are they going to do? Like, are they all just going to die? Are they going to be strangled off as the snakes pick them off at the perimeter? Or are they going to do something about it? And they're feeling a little too tender, but one mouse is brave enough to take this axe made by a blacksmith and go out and take on the snakes. So much emotion, their little mousy faces, and also their mouse bodies are drawn so well. Like they don't just have human hands and human legs. They maintain the anatomy of mouse. The lettering is also really good. There's no letterer credit on the credits page that I'm looking at. So I don't know who lettered it. Maybe that's Words and Colors by David Peterson. So I don't know, but the lettering was really good and really, really readable. It did get to a point in this fight with the snake that a few of the issues of geography got a little confusing to me. This has got a great example. In this first panel, that golden thing in the air, the mouse has taken off this mask and he realizes the snake is blind, so he throws it to make noise. But it took me a really long time to figure out he threw it behind him and then ran in the other direction. That's what you're seeing the snake move to in the second panel. Because I think I don't know. There were a couple moments like that in the snake fight where there was motion in one panel and the result of motion in the other panel, but the directionality of the motion didn't necessarily track. So I missed that's what happened with the thing that got flung or thrown or jumped or whatever. But I did eventually get it, and it just made me appreciate this art even more and read it even more closely. And this number 1 was a bombshell. It was so good. If you've never read Mouse Guard at all, maybe the main Mouse Guard series has more emotionality to it because it follows characters more and it's not as action-oriented. But this, to me, is the perfect advertisement to read more Mouse Guard because I was like, I will read 100 issues of this right now. So I'm going to make some time in my life to read some more Mouse Guard. I might just read this whole series first. It was so good. it's going to be in the top 10 if it keeps being this good. Now, but yeah, I'm so interested in reading more Mouse Guard. And to hear us talk about that, we talked about on the Near Mint Condition Evergreen Library stream, which was in the middle of last year. And somebody picked Mouse Guard as one of the books they think every library should always have on the shelf. And I do believe we may have voted it through. I don't know. I'm a goldfish, so I don't remember, but you can go and see that. Then we come to My Little Pony Case of the Missing Puff. I did not read this. I'm not a My Little Pony person, but it does look adorable. And that's it for the M's. So we got to the middle of the alphabet. Let me stop my share for a second and just check in with everybody in the chat and see how y'all are doing. Ryan Wilson is so tired of them retconning Batman's origin and them messing with his parents. I agree. And that I always get my hackles up when I see them starting to lean in that direction. I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it. I don't want you to do that, folks. But it worked for me in this new Tom Taylor series because ultimately, I don't want to spoil this issue, but the point of it is, does that matter? Will that matter? Will it have mattered that I change, that the origin is different, or is Batman still Batman? And because he approaches it from that perspective, and because of how this issue turns out, the thing that I was worried about that I think you very, very rightfully are tired of did not become a problem for me. So that is the message that I have for you about that. Okay. Tom Taylor can really do no wrong. He saved Nightwing, the best Nightwing run ever, I think. He gave so much heart to John Kent, agreed, and now he's making Batman. I love his, Always an Inscator, I love his Suicide Squad. I think hugely overlooked because it wasn't the Suicide Squad anybody was used to at that point. Great comic book. Tom Taylor. And then he does all, I remember reading his Injustice. I've never read some of his other stuff like the All Winter or Dark Knights of Steel. Maybe I should, because I kind of vibe with him almost every time. And he also like writes a cartoon, right? The Deep. I think he like owns the IP rights of that cartoon. Just seems like a pretty cool guy. And love supporting an Australian, Team Oceana, all the way. Moonin saying good evening. James Abel read Dick Tracy, so I didn't have to. It seemed like the writer wanted to write a Batman story, but changed Batman characters to Dick Tracy. Well, a lot of Batman characters are based on Dick Tracy. I mean, I think. I don't know. I think Dick Tracy predates Batman. Curtis would know the answer to this. But that's the thing. I like all the cool Dick Tracy characters, but I just think that this book it's so focused on being a hard-boiled crime book that tells these like 5 and 6 issue crime stories that it's giving up the fact that Dick Tracy is kind of the proto-Batman. It's as if there's no Batman and Commissioner Gordon had to do it all himself. That's what Dick Tracy is, and it's missing that magic to me. Super Job, I liked the beginning of Ram V's Detective Comics run. That first arc really knocked my socks off. I think Ram V has a problem, at least for me as a reader, where he gets really mired in giving a lot of background information and world building at the beginning. And then in the middle, he kind of gets stuck in a loop of like repeating a lot of the world building details over and over again. And it stops feeling like story goes forward. And I only think he does that when he's on an unlimited series, which he hasn't written a lot of. And Detective was only one of his few. Anytime he's got a certain amount of issues to get in and get out on, I feel like he does a great job with that. So I was worn out by the end. I feel like the middle was like 8 or 9 issues too long. It really dragged on, but then it ended great. But I still don't feel like it fulfilled the amazing promise of the beginning. I'm happy you like the first Dick Tracy trade, Ryan. And I would say, if you like the first trade, I think Segura is doing just as good a job on the second stuff, the trade's worth of stuff, as he did in the first trade. I think I've determined it is not for me. Lots of people wishing Max Appleman happy birthday. Eric Garza, I read several issues of Deviant last year and loved it. Fell off the monthlies around 4 or 5. Oh, Eric, you will be rewarded for coming back. I was like, how could this possibly end in a satisfying way? 9 issues. And it did. And I refuse to spoil it. Brendan Riley enjoyed the Thunderbolts miniseries from Lansing and Kelly about a year ago in Doomtime, and I just wish Marvel would keep the book going instead of yet another restart in June. Oh, see, I hadn't even seen that it was going to restart again in June. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree that, and I like them on Thunderbolts, and I think the first issue of this Thunderbolts book was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I see Next Imaginaut larking in the chat, but he hasn't added me yet, so I'm not going to, we have an agreement that I don't highlight him talking to other people. Buttery, flaky, crusted. Hey, Krisis, what are my thoughts on Batman Dark Patterns? Amazing, amazing. Everybody in the stream can tell you I'm obsessed with it. It's my number 3 comic right now. I don't think I don't know if I've ever been as obsessed with a Batman comic. I'll tell you. Let's think back. What are Batman comics I've been obsessed with? I love James Tynian's Detective Comics from the beginning of Rebirth. I love Long Halloween. This might be my third favorite Batman. Again, not Bat Family, not Batwoman, not Batgirl, not Nightwing. This might be my third favorite Batman comic right now. I mean, we're only 5 issues in, so we'll see. Or 4 issues in. So it's early yet. And again, limited series, 12 issues. But I think you could not ask for a better Batman comic. There's nobody else in comics doing art like this. Absolutely amazing. Hayden Sherman, love them. Jaggernaut, hello, Jaggernaut. With Omar's announcement of Avengers by Johns and Coyple, would I recommend continuing with New Avengers Omni 1 and 2? Well, New Avengers is a totally different run, right? Johns and Coyple were the end of that Perez and Biziak era of like the Avengers are classic. The very classic. Let's tell classic stories of classic Avengers, classically classicing. And then Bendis shook shit up, right? So like I think you would be more likely to like the Johns and Coyple book if you liked the Biziak and Perez run. I think it has absolutely nothing to do with the Bendis run. I really like the Johns book. I think he uses a really good team. I think a lot of the stories are good. Even some of the Chuck Austin stuff in it is fine. And people love to beat up on Chuck Austin. I think it's really readable. And those trades used to be really hard to get. They finally recollected them, but they used to be really hard to find. I love that it's an omnibus. Now we have continuous Avengers in omnibus from 1998 to 2010. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So many people saying happy birthday to Max. Is Al Ewing Krakoa run omnibus self-contained? Can it be read without needing to know? I say mostly yes. If you have not read X of Swords or Planet-Size X-Men, you might not fully understand the scope of Arakko and who all the Arakko mutants are and why they're on Mars and why we care. But I think Ewing does a good job of explaining that. And I think most of the story threads that Ewing invents, writes, and resolves exists solely within that book, and it ends in a satisfying way that does not need you to read all of the Fall of the House of X. So I think it's one of the best X-Men runs of all time, in my opinion. Not as good as Gillen, though. Not as good as Gillen. Okay, lots of people still talking to Max and how much Max is great, and I agree. As for the Assassin's Apprentice comic series, I have not read the comics, says Kane. However, I'm told the comics follow the prose novel well enough that if you enjoyed the prose novel, you will like the comic. It's in the same vein as Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, which I have a lot of friends who love, graphic novel series adapting from the prose series. Oh, well, I'm very slow at reading books because I always have to read 60 comics a week, so maybe I should just add it to my poll list. Jean-Remy Argueta wanted to quickly jump in and say, hi, hello to you, my friend. I'm really happy you're here. I hope you are well. Currently at Arc World, I don't know what that is, so won't be able to stay long, but hope you have a nice day and nice stream. Catch you guys in the replay. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It does help when you like. Everybody, it does help when you like. If you haven't liked yet, please do like. Cyril's got to go, but we'll catch up in the stream later. Have a nice one. Nice one to you as well. And here's that Max Appleman YouTube. It's just Max Appleman at YouTube. Really easy to find. I expect to see more subscribers on his channel as well as mine when this is over. Brandon Riley says, if I could only keep a single spider or symbiote related book on his pull list, it'd be Eddie Brock Carnage. Yeah, the first 2 issues are just cool. They're cool. They're really cool. Okay. James Abel says exceptional X-Men number 7. I knew it that it was redacted. I'm not spoiling, but if you read it, you got spoiled. Was behind everything, but of course the cover spoiled it. So we already knew. The first 3 issues of Exceptional were a blast. Need to catch up. Yeah, and that's what's on Marvel Unlimited right now. It's good. It's slow, but it's really, really high quality. Here's the thing, and Brevoort, I think, fairly here points in Brevoort's favor. In that same newsletter that we were reading from earlier, he basically says, if your problem with Exceptional is that it's moving slowly, let it go. Just enjoy the book moving slowly. And I did need to hear that message. So Brevoort's not always wrong about everything. That's not what I'm trying to say. Okay, G.I. Joe number 5. James Abel says, zap, zap, pow, boom, yo, Joe, bang, slash, whoosh, pow, beep, click. Who the hell are you? I don't know what that means, but okay. Can I read Carnage without being caught up on Venom? Absolutely, yes. There's nothing you need to know from King of Black Venom, War of Carnage across the universe. Nothing. It totally makes sense all on its own. You're going to ask, why isn't Eddie Brock with his own symbiote? But that's the story that's being told, so he's not. Okay. Darth Twinkie, would I ever consider doing a Xenoscope reading order? Yes. I don't know if anybody cares. I don't know if anybody cares, and I would have to read a lot of old Xenoscope, but I don't know if it's all on Comixology Unlimited anymore. It used to be. So I don't know if there'd be an easy way to read it, and it would be impossible for me to get it physically here in New Zealand. But I would like to, yeah. And I think it's so much better than anybody. What I've understood, what I've come to understand, and that I needed that Peanuts special today to remind me of this, is it used to be the Cheesecake comic universe. And I think that was true for the first like 7, 8 years. And then over time, it just became this cool ongoing story. And then from 2016 forward, it's just been the female trope protagonist universe. And it's just not that cheesecakey. And I know I sound like a weirdo because I always say it, but that's because I've never heard of anybody else in the whole world who reads Zenescope comics, which makes me think maybe people really do just buy them for the cover and nobody's reading the interiors ever, which is crazy to me. It's a whole universe of female protagonists. Like, get in there, right? So, sometimes I've got to decide for myself if it's time to spend the time on a guide or not. It took me about only 3 hours to do that Energon Universe guide this week because I've read every issue of it already. So it was really easy for me just off the top of my head to write about it. So there was no research involved. It's still relatively young. There's probably like under 50 total issues right now. Still took 3 hours. So something for Zenescope, they've been around for 20 years. Just the second volume of Grim Fairy Tales is up into the 90s. They've published hundreds of comic books. So not only would that take me a long time to research and write, but also I have to think sometimes in my own best interest, does anybody care about this? And do my patrons care about it, right? Because they're the ones who are funding new guides. So sometimes I can get away with something really niche like Lady Death, which is eventually going to happen because my patrons aren't going to punish me for doing that. And sometimes I'll do Vampirella because it turns out tons of people are interested in Vampirella and would read Vampirella if there were better guides to her. But I just don't know if Zenescope, I don't know if it ticks any of those boxes. I don't know. The Zenescope Senex, wide old sage archetype. Oh, that's who that guy is. How do you know all the things that you know? Next Image Not. I don't understand. Jewish Dragons saying hello. James Abel, LA Strong, a beautiful love letter to firefighters and people for Los Angeles with so much emotion within the pages from the art and the words. You felt the impact of the LA fire had on people. And also I really liked about it is people with very different views. Like Bendis wrote a page, but his page was like, hey, Hollywood is cool. We like working with Hollywood. And then we have people who like moved out west with people. Steve Orlando was talking about how he's volunteered with catastrophic events in the past and getting people back on their feet. Everybody's got their own perspective that they brought on it. So some of it felt very Hollywood. Some of it felt very, I've lived in the hills my whole life, but some of it, all of it was very human. And I think that's what I appreciated about it. Yes, Peter Pan syndrome is what The Last Boy is about. It's named after Peter Pan. So of course Peter Pan has it. And that's why I think I kind of just felt like it felt like very, yes, obviously to me. Yes, obviously Peter Pan has Peter Pan syndrome. I don't know why we need a whole book about that. The name changes saying, hola, Max Appelman remembering that movie that I hate called Very Bad Things, which now that you reminded me it's in 1998, I remember seeing it in the movie theater and thinking I wanted to leave, but I'm so stubborn about not leaving the movies, even back then, once I've paid for it and I'm seated, that I sat there, but I remember just like seething about how much I hated it. Cruel Angel and Magic. Ileana has now 3 issues or weeks left to try to rein in the Dark Child. Somehow I doubt it's going to work out. Much love for seeing who showed up at Ecuador. Oh yeah, I almost put the final page reveal into the slides for the show because I was so excited that she's consistently one of my top characters. Trying not to spoil for people who know me well. But yeah, I have faith that this book is going interesting places. I'm hanging in there. I think it's been rewarding enough in each of the 3 issues so far that I do not feel bait and switched. Novarg, I love your artwork. Novarg, I can't wait to read it when it's all done. I love Gen 13 as well, but Campbell is a one-note artist. He draws every character the same way. The difference is their eyebrows. Great art, but after 30 years, he peaked with Danger Girl. Yeah, Gen 13 absolutely will get a reading order, hopefully this year, time allowing. But I love Gen 13. Love, love, love. Gen 13. Kane may be the only one who remembers this show, and that's fine, but she misses rather, Fox's cartoon Peter Pan TV show, back when Fox did Saturday morning cartoons in the 90s and O's. Lawful, I don't know if it's on Global Comics, but check it out. I don't know if I loved it enough that I feel okay saying buy the trade, but the trade might be on Hoopla or something from the library. Check it out there. Whoa, Tim Curry, my favorite, did the voice of Captain Hook. Love that. Maybe you don't all know this. I've talked about it, I think, on Omni Dog's Vault. I think all Mr. Sinister dialogue should be read in Tim Curry's voice. So if he's like, Cyclops, you don't know about your 8th brother, I think that should sound like, Cyclops, you don't know about your 8th brother. There's even a 9th. It's brothers all the way down. That's how I think all Mr. Sinister dialogue should be read. I wish I could place Magic's current run on my pull list, but I had to tell myself to take it easy from this year on with Comic Plus. It's going to be a Marvel Unlimited. Whether your constraint is space or money or time, it's all going to be on Marvel Unlimited. It's not going anywhere. Only if you're going to FOMO yourself about single issues or trades do you have to keep on that hamster wheel. And I'm very happy I jumped off that hamster wheel because it's never ending. And we're not always going to have bigger houses. At one point, you're going to want to downsize and you're going to go, I've got a lot of books. And the way I can tell you that is because I'm that person. Kyle the Mighty, thank you for coming through. Dick Tracy does predate Batman, and yes, there was definitely an influence on Batman. I think that's what I want. I want to read Dick Tracy that feels like the Dick Tracy that influenced Batman. So maybe I would have liked this week's issue because James Abel said it felt like a Batman story. So there you go. Ryan Wilson agreeing with me. I love the beginning of Ram v Detective, but it got really boring, and I haven't really read the last 8 issues. Well, it ended strong. I also hate the stories where they have more than one issue that's a dream. I agree. There's only so long that I can hang in for a dream sequence, and that really pushed me beyond my limit. Eric Garza said, I love Ram v's tech. It does meander in the middle slightly, but the amount of payoff in the final 10 issues is such a fun read. It reads far better collected. Yeah, something I did that I think was worthwhile doing is I refused to keep up with it as it went. I only read it one trade at a time. I think the middle suffered more from that because the trade really went on forever, but I think I would have hated it even more in singles. But then I do think that reading each story with a beginning and an end made it he definitely wrote it as volumes. I don't think he was super obsessed with making every issue hit. He was making it all kind of work. So, okay, people are still talking, but we have so many more books to talk about. So I'm going to bookmark there. And we're going to continue into the second PDF. We're into PDF of the second half of the alphabet. We're already 2 hours in. Holy Jesus. New champions. You've heard me beat up a little bit on this Steve Fox comic. It's talking about why does it exist? This issue, I kind of got there. First of all, Ivan Fiorelli's art was really, really good throughout this issue. It really let me know who the characters were. I was able to follow them in space. Also, the colors from Arthur Hesley, just really exciting. But here's the thing. Now that we spent 2 issues assembling this team, Steve Fox brings in yet other characters. He has them face off against the champions we previously knew from 2016, like Ms. Marvel and Miles Morales. They're only in this briefly. You shouldn't get this issue just because you like those characters. But for me, I found that actually it was effective. Steve Fox did this thing where he introduced way too many characters at once, but now he's brought the focus way down to just 5 of them. And we're starting to understand like who they are and what makes them tick and what they want to do in the world, and that they're just kids. Like even these older Marvel kids that are in the other champions, to them seem like adults because they've been through much. They've had so many stories. And I think I kind of get it. It still feels like they sent Steve Fox on a thankless task here because I don't know how there's any way to make this comic really sing and be good when it's got nobody that I don't think anybody's interested in reading unless they're all in like Marvel Snap or Marvel Rivals. But I am in favor of there being new characters being invented and always expanding the universe. And it felt for the first time for me in this issue, like I got to spend enough time slowing down and being close to them that I actually started to like them. And I feel like that's what was missing from the first 2 issues for me. I feel like it could have almost started with this story, but this story needed the first 2 issues to happen. So I get it. All right. Now we come to Ram. Speaking of Ram V's new gods. This issue had all sorts of things I love in it, namely Evan Cagle on art, but then guest art from Bernard Chang in good mode. Sometimes I don't like Bernard Chang. Here I did. Francesco Segala's covers, but also colors rather, but also it had that little pinch of continuity. And then the rest of the issue was about things that are happening in the current day. It had an absolutely spectacular war on New Genesis and it switches seamlessly between Bernard Chang, who drew this page, and Evan Cagle on art. And it was so epic. It made me feel like I was reading some like crazy, like European bande dessinée comic book, like a Mobius comic or something. It just was so incredible. And then it gave me enough time on Earth with Big Barda and with Mr. Miracle and with Orion ultimately that I like really was satisfied that plot was moving forward, which is what last issue was missing for me. I love this. And I don't know any new gods. One day I'll make time to read all that 70s stuff, but y'all, my reading list is eternal and there's only so many hours in the day. So I would hate if I had to stay at arm's length from liking this run because I don't know all that new gods continuity. I don't think that's the case. I think maybe last issue flirted with that. This issue was so satisfying. I liked it so much. I recommend it so highly. And it's just epic. It feels big. It feels like the biggest story being told in continuity at DC right now. And I love that for it. It's just really, really huge, really, really satisfying. Nightwing from Dan Waters. You know, I've been asking myself and all of you these past few months, why is this not as good as Dan Waters on other things like Dark Patterns? And why is this not as good as Tom Taylor on Nightwing? Could anything be as good? I think this issue finally got there. And here's why. Because Dan Waters is a weirdo. he writes the best when he's playing in this weird space that's liminal, space that feels a little bit transgressive. And he basically has this villain, so far as we understand him, exists between life and death. So only when Nightwing flirts between life and death does he even encounter this villain. But clearly the villain is also puppeteering other things happening, so that it makes you ask, like, how is this moment between life and death connected to the whole world? But it makes sense, right? Because Nightwing, as a former acrobat, as somebody who is death defying quite literally every time he leaps off of a building without a net or off a trapeze without a net, would have a relationship with a villain who lives in the liminal space between life and death. So it really, really worked for me. And it was the last issue was weird too, because it had some body horror in it. This issue worked well. And it also said it was the finale, but it's not really a finale because there's a cliffhanger on the last page, which clearly is going to lead into the next issue. I think I'm finally on board. It took Dan Waters a few issues to get underway, but I think between this villain, between the outstanding art from Dexter Soy with colors from Veronica Gandini, I think I'm finally getting there. I don't know that I can recommend this to people who liked Tom Taylor's Nightwing, because that was just really one of the best comics ever. So it's really, really hard to say if this is going to reach those heights. But I think for people who just like Nightwing, to me, last issue and this issue got it to the point where I'm willing to recommend it to Nightwing fans, which the first 3 issues did not. I'm not reading Null Hunter from Michael Walsh. It's the story of Hercules, but told as a space opera, but told also as like cyberpunk. Too many hats on that particular head for me. But now we come to One World Under Doom, which, as you might recall, was in my top 10 and today was conspicuously not. The first thing I want to talk about is this page. I thought this was the intro page, like the recap page. No, this was just a diegetic page of all the media happening in the world. And I went in and squinted at all the words. It talks about how the stock market is going. It talks about Dr. Doom's approval ratings. Just really smart, clever, really, really grounded me in the world. Here's what was really surprising about this issue. Ryan North, who I love and is established that I love, he wrote the Fantastic Four completely wrong. And it's not just, I saw other people saying this too. Anytime I have one of these like fundamental gut objections to a comic, after I read it, I will go and look at other opinions to be like, did I miss something? Am I outlier? He just writes them kind of dumb, and he writes like and vindictive, and they think they're going to like break into the UN and fight Dr. Doom in the UN. And that's going to prove to everybody that Dr. Doom is bad because it's going to embarrass him. That you have some of the smartest people in the world making this plan. It didn't make any sense. And so then everything that happened after that, this idea that like Doom is, I understand the idea that the heroes are so rooted in this idea that Doom is so bad that him taking over the world can't be a good thing. And we've got to like expose him somehow, but it just didn't feel like the reasoning track. There's so many other ways the Fantastic Four could have decided to expose him. However, this issue was not all bad because it had an intensely fantastic philosophical discussion between Dr. Doom and his adopted niece, Valeria Richards. That was written perfectly. And I love Valeria Richards. It was written so well to really let you inside of Dr. Doom and why he's doing this. And it drives home like he would never lie to Valeria. So there's no hidden agenda, or so he says. He really believes that the world will be better off under him. Really, really interesting. So I'm not saying this was all bad. It just felt like Ryan North was kind of setting up the heroes to be dummies in the same way that they've been set up to be dummies in Civil War and Civil War II. And everybody hates when the heroes are dummies. Let them be smart, right? So I don't know if this was just a rare miss or if there's something more than was going on here, or maybe it's his arms being twisted editorially, because it doesn't feel like his Fantastic Four from his Fantastic Four ongoing. That said, brilliant art from LRB Silva. Brilliant colors from David Curiel. So readable from Travis Lanham. It's absolutely great on a craft perspective. I just think the story didn't feel worthy of how smart the first issue was and how smart the conversation with Valeria was, honestly. This was my surprise of the week. I was like, okay, a story about three people really, who actually did escape from Alcatraz in the 1960s. I think it was 1962, as written by Christopher Cantwell and illustrated by Tyler Crook. Like, okay, I guess I'll read it. No, this was perfect. Perfect. It was a perfect comic book. It supposes, the official story in the real world is that these guys drowned as they were, in the bay, as they were trying to, the makeshift raft, get them off the island. And this basically supposes, what if they didn't? And it follows them onto the mainland in the 1960s and just says, like, what would it be like for these two escaped prisoners? They're not necessarily violent prisoners, but they know their way around crime, and they're in the world. Who helped them escape? Who promised them a life? What do they think the life is going to be for them in the real world? And it shows them on the fringes of society, and they both have their own things they want from it. There's one guy, he's a little bit of a softie, And all he really wants is to just go buy some candy at the drugstore. And they've been told, like, don't go out in public, don't make public appearances, but he just can't resist. And I love just seeing all the box design of these very, these boxes and graphic design that are true to the 1960s. But I just loved how he just wanted to go get some candy after being in prison, where the other inmate is really thinking about more practical concerns. Where's our money going to come from? How are we going to get farther away from here? It was a page turner. I lingered on every panel of art. I think it set up such interesting characters. They didn't just feel like cardboard box tough guys to me. It felt really dynamic. It felt grounded in being in the 1960s. At no point did it feel modern to me. Christopher Cantwell, of course, writes for screen. He's the creator of *Halt and Catch Fire*, a fantastic TV show if you've never seen it. I don't always feel like the qualities of his screenwriting comes through in his comics writing. He's a very different comics writer than a screenwriter. I felt like they came through here. This has the highest possible crisis recommendation, with a caveat. You never know with a number one. Number ones are their own science. Sometimes there's an amazing number one and the number two just does not keep up that level of game. Case in point, One World Under Doom. So I'm not telling you pick up this whole series, but if you love a good number one, if you love reading a number one that's incredibly well executed, this number one was a 5 out of 5 for me. I did not read Overwatch 2 because I don't read or play Overwatch, so I think it would probably be lost on me. I love this. I love it. I love it. Okay. The Power Fantasy. So this is the Power Fantasy issue number 7 from Kieran Gillen, Caspar Wingard, and Clayton Cowles. The Power Fantasy played this amazing trick. It told us a complete story arc in the first 5 issues, and yet it just left us with questions. It left us with so much open air about what happens next, what happened in the past, how did we get here? Now, Gillen is going to methodically start closing those parentheses by showing us some of the things that happened in the past and how we got here, as he introduces even new questions. Love it. The artwork in here from Caspar Wingard is this cathedral of pain that one of our characters visits. I just got so lost. There's so much detail that goes so small on page after page of it. And I just was staring with my nose right against the computer screen. But it ties into the plot because there's this horrible thing that happens in 1989, the second summer of love, except for it starts out looking pretty great. It's one of the biggest superpowers of all time that they discover. And this superpower, she seems to just want to make the world love again. And considering the baggage that these characters have from the first summer of love, when they were basically hunted by, the world governments because they were superpowers and the government saw it as a time to get rid of them, they have a lot of baggage. And so the idea of love making a comeback is very attractive to them, but there's a darkness involved. So this issue is different than, I would say, all the issues of this book so far have really told one thing in one issue that kind of focuses on one aspect of the story. This is very much continued into next issue, number 8. This side of the story was the happy part of the summer of love, the second summer of love. Next issue is going to be the sad part. This comic book is, the way that Gillen pitched it and the way that I think is right to talk about it is, it's the quiet council of the X-Men, except for they never punch. Magneto and Xavier never punch each other. It is 60 years spent in a world where mutants exist and some of them are Omega. And how does a world deal with it? The idea of Omega mutants who don't want to put on spandex and don't want to be superheroes. They're just living their life with the ability to fundamentally alter and possibly destroy the world. This is comics at the highest level of craft. And the back matter from Gillen in this issue. I love reading Gillen's endnotes. The other person I really, really love, we'll get to in a moment, reading their endnotes. It was so interesting. And he had such interesting things to say about, if superhero has been in deconstruction mode since Watchmen, at this point, deconstruction mode is superhero. At a point, the thing that is a comment on the thing becomes inherent to the thing. It's how The Simpsons becomes self-referencing, right? It's how Drag Race becomes self-referencing. Superhero as a comic book genre now includes deconstruction in the reference of superhero. So to say, I'm writing a deconstructionalist superhero comic right now just means you're writing a superhero comic. Gillen has such interesting things to say about it. I don't know. I didn't get the Power Fantasy trade. Maybe some of you have it. Can you tell me, does it include his back matter in the trade? Because the back matter essays, I guess I would know from Die, which I have around here somewhere. Hold on, pause. Is Die within arm's reach? Because if Die has his, I can't find it. If Die has his back matter in it, then this would too. But I don't have, it's somewhere on the shelf right in front of me, but there's so many books on it, but I can't find it. So I can't answer that question right now. So maybe one of you can answer it for me. Okay, moving on. Psylocke, issue number 6, which does cap off an arc. So good job. Okay. Alyssa Wong's last 2 series only made it to issue 10. Tom Brevoort. So we are trying to make it to issue number 11 here with Psylocke, with her first ongoing. And Alyssa Wong did a pretty good job here, except for it was only one idea. It was one idea, which is like, what if we tried to pin Psylocke to a wall like a butterfly? How would she react to it? That's the whole issue. That's the only idea in this issue. It doesn't really end in a satisfying way, but it does close off this first arc. And I will say again, as I've been saying, Vincenzo Caruto's art is superstar level. He's there. This looks like a page of Pepe Larraz. It's incredible. Great colors also by First Fuentes Sujo. And Moises Hidalgo, who I really had trouble with last issue, actually does a few pages here that work much, much better to me. So this book, it's got the right voice. It's got the right art. I do think we're really learning more about Conan in a way that's really, really interesting. But I need the next arc to be about something. I need to go somewhere. I need to feel like there's content. I need to feel like there's story. Because this issue, truly, once you've seen this page, you know what this whole issue is about. And that's not going to be enough to get this to issue number 11, I don't think. Next, we come to Question All Along the Watchtower. Number 5, we only have one issue left of this comic book by Alex Segura with art from Cian Tormey, color, and Rolf Fernandez, colors from Romulo Fajardo Jr., letters from Willie Schubert. This almost worked for me. Almost. Look, the whole point of this is the question is a fish out of water on the Watchtower. Like, this is much more super than the Gotham City stuff she's used to handling. So she's got to use her wits and her skills to make things work in a superhero world. I think there are pages where that works, and it's sold very, very well by Cian Tormey on art. But then it doesn't feel like we really got to watch her solve a mystery. And then when we focus on the villain of this piece, the story falls apart. Like their motivation isn't there. Their monologuing doesn't make sense. It really loses cohesion for me. So I think we're 5 issues in. I've been really rooting for this book. I think because I've been giving it a lot of credit for how good it looks. I don't really feel like Alex Segura got anywhere interesting with the question as a character, and now it's going to end next issue, and that's fine. I think people will like it if they like the question. I think it's a fine book set on the Justice League satellite. I think there's something to this group of characters. I would really like if we could get like a Justice League International. That's the question, Animal Man, Blue Beetle, Nightshade. I think this cast is really cool, and I would totally read that book, and I think there's room for there to be a second Justice League book right now. I don't think the focus on the question operating as a detective on the Watchtower actually worked. But there's a really cute, really well illustrated dog. I wanted to give a shout out. I don't know if this page is by Cian Tormey or by Rolf Fernandez, or if they work together. I don't know. But this dog is just drawn really, really well at different angles. You really got the sense of this artist like, I've done my dog study, and I'm going to make this dog look like the most dog that ever dogged in a comic book about a dog. And I appreciated that, because a lot of artists, like when it comes to like dogs and horses and things, they like don't want to draw them doing different things, having different expressions, being at all different angles, because it's hard. It's hard. You got to do homework. This dog really felt like the homework was done. I wanted to catch up on Rat City this week because I really liked issue number 1. I keep saying how it's Spawn 2099 and everybody, by Erica Schultz. I just ran out of time. I just didn't have the time. So if next month I don't have another 70 book week, plus I caught up on all of Deviant and all of Saga, which we were about to hit. So that was over 30 issues. So I just did not have time to read this one, but I'm hoping to catch up on it for next time. I did not read Red Sonja Attacks Mars. I read some core Red Sonja titles, but I don't love her so much that I need to follow all Red Sonja. I did not read Rick and Morty Ricklemania. I do sometimes enjoy a Rick and Morty comic book, but I'm not a big wrestling person, so it just would probably be lost on me. However, I did read the Rockefellers. This was kind of an in-betweener issue of the Rockefellers after 3 issues that felt very distinct and complete. Of course, written by Peter Tomasi with art from Francis Manapul, which is gorgeous. Colors split by Manapul along with John Callies and Ian Herring, although I didn't really notice any discontinuity. Letters from Rob Lee. I liked it because it showed us how each of these characters are not adapting to the current world. Great, speaking of The Simpsons from a couple of chats ago, great gag from the credits of Simpsons of him having to write on the board and being like, I'm not going to write on the board. I can make a gadget that does that. I think this issue did a good job of kind of establishing that this family, even though they want to fit in 2025, they're never going to. They're from the future, and the way they think about things from the future is just different than how we think about things in the current day. But it also shows us the whole kind of time cop continuum, and that there's time cops that are in the past, further in the past for good reason, and that they visit all different times, which I think kind of dials up how much risk the family is hiding in time, because it's not like nobody goes back in time. People go back in time all the time, which is this issue, I think, is the first time, the one that really, really introduced that. And so they're at risk. And also, I love the way that Manapul changed up his art style a little bit from this kind of very clean, pleasant. Look how underlined it is. Like his face has very few lines, not a lot of shading. It's big, bold, clean artwork. Even some of the lines in the actual art are done as color holds so that the line is color, so there's less black on the page. Then look how much black is on the page in this part that's like set in 1875 in the Black Hills of South Dakota. There lived a young man named Rocky Raccoon, but it is in the Black Hills of South Dakota. And look how different the art style looks. I love when artists do things like that. So I still love this book. It's incredible. It's the Fantastic Four as a standalone book, but the Fantastic Four are time travelers. And the reason that they're so fantastic in the modern days, because they're actually from the 25th century. Brilliant book. Absolutely love it. Rick Remender's The Sacrificers. I have a lot of challenges with this book, y'all. So it's art by Max Fumera, which is incomparable. Colored by Dave McCade. I don't know if I've seen anything look this beautiful month in and month out. It's really up there. But this issue plays the beat that the god who's the personification of the sun. This is all about his daughter, but also about how he rules over this pantheon of made-up gods. And the tension in this series has always been between, is it a modern mythology? Is it a mythology of Rick Remender's making that's all about these gods and this world that he's made up? Or is it a story about people on the ground and how the gods are fallible? And of course it's about both. And the whole point of the book is that it's about both. But I think the problem is that the god stuff feels so big and mythic that when the gods come down and interact on the world, it kind of like throws the weight of the book out of scope. And I get that that is what the story is, but for me, I just like the God story so much better. I like that this is a pantheon of mythology that feels complete and whole, and like it stands up right next to Greek mythology without being Greek mythology. And then when we zoom in on the personal stuff, even though it's about the difference between cynicism and hope and how you can try to have both at the same time and they work together hand in hand, it just doesn't always work for me when we zoom down to that level. Also, this issue kind of is about the destructive power of gods and the destructive power of what's the word that I'm looking for? Them always thinking they're right, trusting in their omniscience and their hubris, that ultimately can lead to the downfall, both metaphorically and physically, of gods themselves. It kind of feels like it paints itself into a corner for me as the end of an arc that's, I didn't really understand like where we could go from here. But you know what? That's not my problem. That's Rick Remender's problem to solve out of. Ultimately, great issue, beautiful art. I am personally challenged by the interplay between the two elements in this book, but I think this issue puts on display how powerful both of those two elements are on their own, even if they don't always marry up perfectly together. Oh, I put the cover second. Okay. Saga, of course, by Fiona Staples, Brian K. Vaughan, and on letters, very importantly, because letters are a huge part of this, phonographics. I have not read Saga since 2019, a couple of months before the pandemic really kicked off. We just moved into this house. I just gotten all of the living room set up and some of my comics unpacked. And I said, wouldn't it be nice to just sit here and enjoy some comics? What if I just took out all of Saga and read it? And I had never read actually all the way to issue 54. I'd only read the first few trades because when I first started reading Saga, it was in 2013 when we were pregnant with Kid Crisis. So this book has always come to me at significant periods in my life, and I've always appreciated it because it's always been about family and not only family, but how to make decisions as an adult that you know are affecting your child, but with the added hook of your child basically narrating to you if those decisions made were good or not, because Hazel has always been the narrator of this story. So I picked up the post-hiatus Saga for the first time last week with issue number 55 and read a binge of issue 55 through issue 72. And I guess that was the background for a minute. Now we're going to try to talk about the current. So what's different about this part of Saga, the issue 55 to 72, is that this is the story of Hazel as a grown character, as agency. She's not an adult, but she's a kid who's old enough to have her own adventures within the story. And because of that, it's taken the focus off of the adult characters a little bit more. And it feels much more, not like a kid book, but about a book about a whole family of multiple generations, which it never did before because Hazel was always a toddler in the beginning of the story. For me, that's taken away a lot of the interest in the story. To me, it's still impeccably made. It's one of the most beautifully crafted comics on the market. But to me, I think I identified with the adult characters in it so much, both Marco and Alana, but also many of the other characters as well, that following Hazel doing kid stuff to me is like inherently unsatisfying. But I get that was the promise that was always made. It was the plan that was always there. And so I'm interested in reading it because the world is still changing and it's changing around Hazel, and it shows us how she grows up and how the choices of her parents impact her. And I think that that's still critically important and fundamentally interesting, but it's just not as fundamentally interesting to me as the first 54 issues of this book, which to me will always have a special place in my heart. Now I get to talk just about this issue. We need 3 minutes to do this, but they were all timed. So this issue does absolutely nothing. It was actually really disappointing. It was probably one of the most disappointing single issues I've ever read of Saga, especially to lead us into a hiatus until them coming back later this year or early next this year. Basically, it announces a change in the status quo of the war by virtue of King TV Robot announcing it, that changed the scope of everything we've known to be in conflict in the series. But the whole issue is just people reacting to the news, and then like one little scene of what that means for people on the war front. And we don't even get to spend any time really with Alana and Hazel and the kids. And then we see them briefly for 2 pages at the end. I think the great thing is in a series that's going to be 108 issues, which Brian K. Vaughan has sworn that it's going to go that long, is you can afford to do one issue of everybody reacting to things. And I think this was a cataclysmic enough change in this universe. We know that we earned, and he earned, and they as a creative team earned the ability to show us people reacting to it. However, if I'm talking about the satisfaction level of a single issue, this single issue is not satisfying to me at all. So that's where we are heading into hiatus. I will always read Saga. I think I will always binge it. I don't think I would have very much fun reading it issue by issue every month. So if it ever comes back, when it comes back, they say it's coming back. I probably won't cover it every week on the show, but I just don't know if it's ever going to get back to where it was the first 54 issues for me. Okay. Now we come to Captain America Sam Wilson. This book has been kind of dumpster fire. And that fire is still blazing in this issue. What are you doing, Greg Pak and Evan Narcisse? What is, I don't even know if I have the words. So they're trying to like make this thing about how, corporations are the version of modern slavery. They've got all these people up in this flying city sharecropping for them. Clearly it's a racket. But on top of it just being a racket, they're also gassing people to like make all of them do their bidding. It's just too many hats on hats for me. It's not interesting. Falcon's not doing anything. There's all these characters just talking about something that's fundamentally disinteresting. There's no villain. I don't feel like there's anything to achieve other than get off this flying city and expose it. It's just, there's nothing there. Also, Sam Wilson's sister is like, I found this thing. They're shooting us with gas. And then he just like snaps out of it out of nowhere, like as if seeing the thing snapped out of it, which doesn't make sense. Then on this page, we see a character get sprayed by the gas. And then he's like, I remember everything. I think after having looked in this one page for literally 5 minutes, that it's supposed to communicate to you that the gas is like running out and it doesn't spray him with enough gas, but the artist is not good enough to show that. And also what a shitty scripting choice to say it's spraying with gas, but then he cracks out of it. Like, no, it should show the thing like leaking or broken or something. Like you scripted the wrong moment. And because of that, it made me so confused for so many pages that just made me even angrier. This book is dumb. There's no reason to read it. And I hate to say that because I highly, highly respect and revere Greg Pak and Evan Narcisse. They've written so many comics between them that I really, really love. Evan Narcisse, also a fantastic journalist. This is a stupid Captain America comic book. No one should read it. The Serpent in the Garden was my top indie pick of the week. It's this wonderful kind of almost fairy tale-esque story from Mike Mignola and Ben Stenback with colors by Dave Stewart and letters by Clem Robbins about the world after the world ends and the world of the Hellboy universe. And I really loved the first 2 issues because it was so allegorical in a way that a storybook really feels like. This issue was just a big fight. It was a big fight between the big monster and the red green guy. It was still beautiful. It still had some really interesting things to say about what it means to be a hero and what it means to be a monster, and that throughout our lives, sometimes we have to play both. But ultimately, there was no there. Like, I kind of was waiting for it to end and be like, here's the effect this had on the world, or like, here's this thing we've learned about this character. It kind of just feels like it ended and it was like, okay, so you saw these 2 things fight, and this story was a little bit of a fairy tale in the end. Like, it just didn't go anywhere. So I don't know. Maybe if you've been steeped in Hellboy lore for years and years, maybe it really hit for you and it told you something significant. It did not for me. Silverhawks. I am steeped in Silverhawks because I did used to watch the cartoon as a child, although I really have no recollection of it. I do want to highlight that this has some totally amazing covers. This main cover is by Lucio possibly Perillo, but this one by James Stocco just was incredible. Love this cover so much, especially because this cover foreshortened his guitar so much that it just, I tried to remember in the cartoon if it looked that short or not. But anyway, here's the thing I want to point out about this book. It's doing so much heavy lifting of like the origin of the Silverhawks and how they got to be Silverhawks and what it means to be Silverhawk and the monster break, blah, 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 blah. And it's looked okay, I guess. Seeing the artist do this page of one of the Silverhawks finally in action. The artist, by the way, is George Kambadis with colors from Ellie Wright. This is beautiful. This is exactly what I want from a comic ripped from a cartoon. It looks like single animation cells from a hand-drawn cartoon. More of this. Unfortunately, a lot of the issue was just like, Arjun, here's yet another Silverhawk. Let's find out who he was before being the Silverhawks. I think you can get away with that on Thundercats because everybody knows who the Thundercats are and they have existing affection for the Thundercats. So like there's an amount of viewer interest in going deep into their origin with them. I think in this one, the Silverhawks are such an unknown. They're not as beloved. I think we're ultimately trying to sell the issue to people who have not thought about the Silverhawks in a long time, even though we're hitting that nostalgia button. I just don't know if you need this much origin material. I think you should be front loading this more with more excitement. And if there was more excitement, then it would be coming off better. And we're going to get to in a moment the book that tells me why I think that's correct. Sonic the Hedgehog, I do not read the ongoing Sonic the Hedgehog story. As I mentioned, I don't know anything really about Sonic. So this would be lost on me. I don't read Spectrum from Mad Cave by Rick Quinn and Dave Chisholm because the first two issues pissed me off so much. It's about music, I guess, but it's about a whole made-up world of music. If you're going to write a book that's this entwined with music and also with civil rights, I want to read about the real music and civil rights, not your made-up version. Star Wars The High Republic. So this is the all ages. It's Star Wars The High Republic Adventures. Issue number 16. We're almost at the end of The High Republic. This is written by Daniel Jose Older, who's written all of the High Republic Adventures. This has art from Tony Bruno. You know, I winced a little bit because I always am looking for some art from Talaba. I say his name wrongly, but I'm obsessed with him. Harvey Tolibao. Harvey Tolibao. Names are important and respecting them is important. Who did this cover here? Because he does the interior sometimes and they're amazing. But honestly, I really liked this interior art from Tony Bruno. It was really like plain and elemental, but it was consistent enough on the faces and the expressions that the acting told me something. And look, I can't keep track of all these damn young Jedi are. I have not been reading every issue of this. I read it like 3 years ago and then I picked it back up at issue 14, but somehow I was able to follow all this. I deeply cared about them. I cared about their mission. I was like really tense. Like, are they going to make it work or not? I think for an issue 16 at the very end of a run of an era of Star Wars, this was actually a fantastic comic book. The action was clear. The stakes were big. I got sad when people were getting near death and I didn't even know who they were. And I think Tony Bruno was a really big part of that because he really gave you time to like fall in love with these characters on the panel and showed their clear moments of action and them reacting to the action enough that I could form an emotional connection with them. So I thought it was a really good book. Honestly, this book very rarely has missed in my experience. I did not read the Stitches from Keenspot, not because I'm not boycotting Keenspot anymore. Enough of you have told me you've read Keenspot comics before that I'm going to try to find some of them. I just had already read 62 issues this week and I was out of time and patience. I'm not reading Superman: The Last Days of Lex Luthor by Mark Waid and Brian Hitch because, intriguingly enough, the first issue of this came out, I think, a year and a half ago, and we've been waiting all this time. I don't know why. Maybe Hitch can be slow and he's been drawing Redcoat with Jeff Johns at Image, so maybe it's because of Hitch. But finally, the second issue of 3 came out now. And then next issue is supposedly going to come out next month. I don't do Black Label, but definitely if you read it, mention the comics. And I'll drink. It's my first time saying comics instead of comments this show. And I will bring it up as a highlight. Then there's Synap. This one's really interesting. And I wish more of you were reading it so I could get like a consensus opinion on it. Because I really do not know how to feel about it. It's a giant mecha world. There's a giant mecha. It can only have one driver at a time. So there's generations of this driver. You can only drive it until you get so old and then you lose your connection with it. Fine. All great. Here's the thing. The art is so incredible. It reminds me kind of a little of like maybe Rachel Stott. I'm trying to think of who it reminds me of, but the art from Andrea Gianni and the colors from James Offreddi it's incredible. I love it. It makes it so easy to stay engaged with it. But the thing that the story is doing with the story by Chris Moses, it's like dancing around saying the thing. This issue spends a long time with this kid who's trying to train to be the next pilot, and they're having a hard time with it. And so his mentor takes him to like a VR video game center and is basically like, this is basically the same thing as piloting the mech. And I took things with me into the mech interface that I learned from this. So maybe you can too. But then it spends like 8 pages on him playing video games. And same thing, there's a hospital where we got another future driver in the hospital paired with 2 of the past drivers, and they're all kind of in conflict with each other, but they're on enemy territory. But it spends so much time of them like walking around the hospital that I never felt like we got to the main center of what this plot is and what the true conflict is about these drivers and about the giant mecha. And I feel like every issue has kind of been like that, but the craft is so strong and the art is so good that it like isn't pissing me off as much as it feels like it should be pissing me off, I guess is the only way to think I can say it. So I'm like not dropping it, even though this issue is totally unsatisfying, because I'm Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Nation. This was on the verge of being in my top 12 this week, and then this issue unfortunately sucked. I loved the first 4 issues, loved. This issue had a pair of one-shot stories, and they were kind of just like silly, frippery little stories that like weren't really interesting or essential to the Turtles. The great thing about the first 4 issues of this was it had 2 stories in each issue that were like a really essential, important seeming Raphael story and a really essential, important feeling Casey Jones story that felt like there wasn't going to be room to tell them in main continuity, so we're going to tell them here in the side book, but they're very much a part of the story of how we got into Jason Aaron's book. And I love that because I do love the Turtles world, and I think there's room to follow all of them around. This just wasn't that. This felt like 2 Marvel digital shorts that like it never will matter if anybody reads, crammed together into one issue. So it was like an issue of It's Jeff and an issue of Amazing Spider-Man or Astonishing Spider-Man all in one. So I don't want to call out all the creators. I'm not trying to hate on anybody. They're very talented creators. I've liked on other stuff, but I really felt like this was inadequate. I'm looking forward to the next issue, hopefully being some stories that have a little bit more of a lasting concern to them. I'm not going to keep reading or buying this anthology book if it's just nonsense garbage. Not good. It wasn't garbage, but like nonsense stories that like just don't really feel like I learned anything critical about any characters. And I'm not here just for a laugh. Those Not Afraid, which is by Kyle Stark, so I usually love, for me is a drop, and it's a drop at issue number 3. This issue is bad enough that I am not going to finish it with issue 4. This is about a series, two serial killers who are kind of working in a little bit of like anything you can do, I can do better, and challenging each other to kills. One of them gets caught at the end of last issue, but they aren't sure if they can charge him, or even if he is the serial killer. He's just been suspicious, and this issue kind of bears this out. It wasn't interesting at all. Like it kind of makes out the one killer to be a superhero as he beats out this whole SWAT team, and then there's a long interrogation scene with the other serial killer, and then the other serial killer is like, what if I do a kill for him while he's in interrogation? Then they'll think that they haven't actually caught the right guy. But then it just was so boring, and here's the thing, I don't understand who to root for. I thought I was supposed to be like rooting for the serial killers to kill people, like very Dexter style, which has its own kind of like transgressive fun to it. And then I also thought maybe I'm supposed to be rooting for law enforcement, or maybe I'm supposed to be rooting for their partners, realizing how terrible people they are. But really, there's just nobody to root for, and they're not even terrible enough that it's fun. So I don't understand, like there's nothing compelling about it. And I like serial killer stuff. If you want to read a great serial killer book, go read The Deviant. This book is not good. Thundercats Lost is the other Ed Brisson book that I was teasing while I was talking about Silverhawks, because this does not have the weight of having to be the main Thundercats series. And so it is like, you know what, we can throw you right in. It starts with this whole group of Thundercats characters that I'm not familiar with. I don't know if they're canonical characters or not, but it starts right in the middle of the action. This is how it starts. No origin story, no explaining who they are. They're in a fight for their lives. And I was like, yes, like I want to see how cool the Thundercats are. And also this art, I am not familiar with this artist, Rafa Labosco, with colors from Roshan Criciano. The art, this was, I mean, there are a lot of amazing art books this week. I was stunned by every page of this. It actually kind of reminded me of Nick Robles a little bit, who drew Absolute Flash. Just like the facial acting and the characters were so dynamic, and they felt like such, you know, like they really like exploded off of the backgrounds, and they all were doing such good facial acting, just scene after scene after scene of it. So this is a small group of Thundercats that are separated from the Thundercats we mostly know and love, and they've got to somehow get a message to them that's very, very important, but they're stranded. They're lost. I was hooked on every page. This is one of my favorite Ed Brisson issues that I've read. And I think that the thing that I wish he would do in Silverhawks is what he did here, which is just drop us in. And I still got who these characters were. I still got the conflicts between them. I still got the tension they're going to have, but I just was absolutely hooked. I cannot wait for another issue of this book. Titans, this issue of a book that's been pretty good by John Layman and Pete Woods on art and colors, and Wes Abbott on letters, it was weirdly unsatisfying. It ended an arc in kind of like a rush finish. Like, we've had so many issues in a row where we've seen Psycho Pirate kind of lurking around in the background and making villains turn against the Titans and impede them. But then now that Psycho Pirates finally got the drop on them, it just turns out to be yet another story about Raven's split personality, and then they deal with Psycho Pirate at the end. Like that, there's nothing really to say. It does do a thing that I enjoyed, which it brings back a character beat from Titans 11 through 12, which is by Tom Taylor. I love when future writers lean into what happened in the previous arc and reference it and don't just try to blaze their own trail. And I think John Layman is very, very generous in doing that. But there's just nothing to this for me. It looked good. Pete Wood's art is incredible, but I just was so annoyed that, I mean, I know I speak out of both sides of my mouth because I just said, you got to resolve things. Arcs can't go on forever. But I think all the build up to the Psycho Pirate moment were so many one-shot issues of stories that were satisfying that it felt that there could have been more to the Psycho Pirate thing. And then to like knock him out just by replaying this Raven has split personality drama that was what Tom Taylor's whole run was already about, it just felt like kind of a cheat. So yeah, they get to the end and they're like, oh, but Deathstroke's actually the one behind it all, but it just didn't feel very satisfying to me. Still very strong craft, but just not very satisfying. TVA, this book is deeply strange because it is legit playing with the idea of what if there was a Marvel multiverse that was the MCU and is in canon to the 616 as a multiverse. They talk about a Scarlet Witch that had a house dropped on her. I mean, it's clearly, or a mountain or something, it's clearly a reference to the second Doctor Strange movie, but it's also following these characters. The only one of them that's from Marvel 616 is Spider-Gwen, although sort of Jimmy Hudson, who is the Ultimate Universe Wolverine that came to 616 after the Ultimate Universe got destroyed. And then Captain Carter, who I guess is not our Captain Carter, and it's definitely a different Gambit. The thing is, the art is so strong by Perry Perez. I've never loved his art this much. It's so gorgeous. It really works. But I think Catherine Blair, who is the writer, who does great voices for all these characters, kind of got a little stuck in a rut in this issue. Like, it felt like she had this idea that she wanted to send them back to 616 Earth again so that she could play Gambit going back to a different New Orleans, but it just didn't feel very motivated. Like, it didn't feel like there was a reason for them to be there. And then the thing that they got there as a MacGuffin didn't feel like it had anything to do with the plot that was going to happen anyway when they got back with it. So I still have really enjoyed this. It was in my top 10 at some point. This issue narratively just felt a little looser to me. And also I feel like it feels like maybe it was obsessed with the idea that it was going to say that it was in continuity with the MCU. And then that rug got pulled out from under it relatively late in the process, that they couldn't market it that way. And so it feels like maybe something about the script got altered or something about it got changed to make it less MCU-y. And maybe that's why this felt like it was struggling to fill space. I don't read Ultimate X-Men as it begins its year 2 from Peach Momoko. Also, there's also Ultimate Black Panther, which apparently I didn't even get the cover of, but I dropped that because I was so angry last issue that I'm like, this is not good for my blood pressure. So I'm not doing Ultimate Black Panther anymore. I'll catch up on it, maybe a trade at a time, but I think it's too garbage. And that one I do think is garbage to keep up with every month. This is Vev. I read it in Global Comics thinking it was going to be a whole number 1. It seems like maybe it's just 10 issues of a tease for a Kickstarter. But let me tell you, as teases go, speaking of hanging out in New Orleans, this was really good. For a comic that's going to kickstart, sometimes I feel like on a Kickstarter comic, it's just like the colors clearly are not professional colors. The art doesn't feel like professional art. No, the pencils and inks from Pabliku here and the colors from Daniel Jr., everything's totally pro. And it's kind of got a strange Academy feel. It's this girl goes to college in New Orleans, but it turns out that she has a connection to all the voodoo happenings of New Orleans, and she's going to be able to see the other side. It's fun. It's intriguing. It feels like something that would fit in the Valiant universe, like with Shadow Man. And the craft was really high. Am I going to contribute to the Kickstarter? No, because I do not like reading single issues of comic books. I do, clearly, because I do it for the show. But when it comes to Kickstarter, I like reading completed works. So I only will Kickstart a comic if it's for a whole graphic novel. This, as far as I know, the Kickstarter is for just number 1, but it was pretty good. If you have Global Comics, it's 10 pages. It'll take you 3 minutes to read. It was pretty cool. Now we come to Walking Dead Deluxe, which I don't read. It's the color version of Walking Dead. My beloved Welcome to the Mainyard gets to its final issue. Script by James Robinson, art by Jay Bone, colors from Ian Herring, letters from Jim Campbell. I just love this adorable world. I love this 1960s style, modern day magical hotel in San Francisco. I love this intricate world of wizards and the duels that they have and the things that they owe each other and their trinkets and what makes somebody powerful and how you can lose your powers and get them back. I just think it's so smart, so wonderful. I wish there was going to be more. I would read an ongoing series of this. And also, I love that this resolves in an unresolved way. Our main character has a chance to kind of like fix everything and have that happy ending, and she decides with her own agency, you know what? I don't think I get a happy ending here. I think some things are just broken and sometimes you can't fix them. And I like that because it felt like a consistent choice to her character. I think this was delightful. I think you can't go wrong reading the 4 issues. If you see this art and if you hear the thing I'm describing, you're like, that sounds charming. It's exactly that charming. It's not a big, I mean, it's a mystery, but it's not like a big epic comic book. It just feels like a Disney cartoon brought to life in the pages of a comic book. Werewolf by Night, unfortunately, I can't read not because it's explicit. I'll read explicit content, but because it's not digital. So I can't read it until a trade paperback comes out. If the trade paperback goes digital, because I'm not buying it physically. So I guess we'll see. I'm not reading When I Lay My Vengeance Down Upon Me because I wasn't a big fan of the art right off the bat. I did read Who Are the Power Pals. I kind of super loved this. Script by Dwayne Murray, art by Ahmed Rafat, letters from Rob Jones. The whole concept is these 2 actors did a pilot for a superhero TV show years ago, like in the realm of Power Rangers, right? And their show didn't get picked up. And so nobody knows about it. Nobody cares about it. It's like even less known than Silverhawks, right? So nobody remembers them. And they've been trying to act this whole time. They can't get a job acting. And so they're like, but they're into it. They totally still think that like they're the super pals and they should be famous for being the super pals. And why won't people remember the super pals as fondly as they remember it? And so it goes through them getting fired from their job in a studio lot. Then they go to Grauman's Chinese Theater where they get in a fight with all the people who are in the costumes in front of the theater, but they go mildly viral for that fight that they're in, which kind of like is the first attention they've had in like 2 decades. So they kind of get into it. It's so funny. And to me, it's like the total opposite of that book. I didn't like the loose ends that are about like boys being boys in this like awful, stupid, offensive, everybody wants to talk about like everything about their genitals the entire time and snorting cocaine and like whatever. This has all of that in it. It has jokes about genitals. It has jokes about drugs, but they're actual lovable characters. It's not saying that boys will be boys means boys being assholes and being disrespectful to people. It's just boys. It's just boys. And like, to me, there's joy in that. And also I just thought it was genuinely funny. And the whole predicament that the 2 of them are in where they're like, won't let go of being superheroes on a canceled TV show that nobody even has on DVD because nobody cares from 20 years ago. It's just so funny to me. Like, it's inherently really funny. And it didn't feel funny in a way that felt similar to anybody else's current style. Like, it didn't feel like this writer was just doing Mark Russell, which I feel like a lot of people do that very Mark Russell or Matt Fraction. There's certain funny writers that it feels like they're kind of aping their style. I feel Dwayne Murray did his very own funny style that didn't remind me of anything else, which made me really, really excited and love this book. Now we come to X-Force issue number 9, and they did X-Force dirty, y'all. This book is getting canceled at number 10 before our first trade can even come out, and the penultimate issue of this series is a tie-in to X-Manhunt that actually is one of the best issues of all of the series because it lets Jeffrey Thorne set aside the whole nonsense plot he's made up about Fractures and Thorne and La Diabla and just focus on the character he's written the best throughout this entire run, Sage. I think this might be the best Sage comic book there's ever been. This really plays with Xavier and his motivations, and that Sage will always trust Xavier. That like Xavier is so few people who always defend him and always be in his corner and always trust him. And Sage, the whole point of this is like begrudgingly, Sage will always be in Xavier's corner. It's so true to her character. It really feels like Jeffrey Thorne went and read a bunch of comics that Sage has been in. And it has kind of this very funny beat of Xavier with the egg. And you might have thought you know what the egg is for. Maybe some of you guessed. I didn't guess what the egg was for. I saw some people complaining about it. No, this to me feels like something I've always waited for this shoe to drop. That this is Chekhov's egg. I kind of in my mind knew that this always was going to happen. And I think that playing it out with Sage to be the one to share the moment with Xavier was perfect. So actually, this is my favorite issue of X-Force, and it's getting canceled next issue after not even really getting to spend much time in its primary cast in this issue. It's got to wrap everything up next issue. And in the trades right now, that's not solicited to include this issue, the best issue of the series. It says it's just going to skip it because it's going to be in the X-Manhunt trade. But I think it's important to include it because it's such a key part of Sage's story, and Sage is such a big cast member in this book. And then I did not read Yera from the Rippaverse. I just was out of time. Great cover, though. Great cover. And I have liked other things by Jen and Sylvia Selska. I want to say I've read stuff from them. And then I did not read You Never Heard of Me. Oh, but I promised 3 hours later we'd talk about Zatanna, and here we are at the 3-hour mark. This is by Jamel Jamel Campbell on writing and art and colors. He's lettered by Ariana Maher. This is so joyful. I thought we were just gonna have to follow Zatanna to like get out of this predicament on her own, but the great thing about it is we bring in Madam Xanadu, what is her name? We bring in Detective Chimp, we bring in the Blue Devil, and they're worried about Zatanna, and we see Zatanna trying to say like, I'm gonna handle it myself, and then being like, okay, but basically you're not. It really works for me because I think over the past year since Rebirth started, DC has done a really good job of developing this little sideline of their magic characters, and like in a way that we understand their relationships, we understand who they are, we understand the spaces they occupy, so you can shorthand just bring them back like you have here. And if you've been reading DC, you've encountered them enough that it's immediately like, oh great, I love these characters. And the art, I mean, just the art of Zatanna kind of falling in and out of these old movies and old settings, but and then also she's in a magical fight. It felt very compressed. It had so many scene setups. There were at least 4 distinct scene setups that fit into this 22-page comic book. Each one of them just as gorgeous as the last. Great writing for this character, great artwork. I mean, this is a true all-timer hit that we have on our hands with Zatanna. And folks, we have reached the end of all the comics this week, including all 62 comics that I've read, which, whoa, something took a dive. Oh no. Oh, my DC style guide. Oh no, and I think we got a little bit of separation of no, maybe not. Well, that's what I got. Books really, you got to be careful when you're facing books out like that on the shelf. You got to really like fan them out a little bit so they have a kind of leg to stand on. And even then, it's a dangerous game. Okay, so I think Baby's gonna get put in forward now. Okay, anyway, hello. It got really sunny outside all of a sudden. Can you see the bounce? So I'm gonna try to spend maybe 5 minutes trying to get through some of your comments, and then we've got to wrap it up, and I guess I'm going to sing a song. Maybe. Let's see. Where did we leave off? Always in the Skater saying Sonic is huge right now with the movies. My kids love all that. I was really surprised at how much of a case study in grief the last movie was. I got the jail issue for your kids and wound up loving it too. Yeah, that issue's perfect for kids. Absolutely highly recommended for kids. I'm trying to just figure out. Oh, I did star a comment. Sometimes when I star, there's the starred comment, but then will it take me to the starred comment? I don't know. I'm struggling, y'all. That book falling really took me out of it. Hold on. I think I'm almost there. No, I lost it. Okay. Let's see what else we've talked about. Got a late start. You just mentioned 2 times speed, and that's what I'm watching at. Smothery Lion, thank you for watching. Hello, by the way. I know how hard I am to watch at 2 times speed. Even me having knew what I said, I can't follow me at 2 times speed. Omnibo saying apparently the new Thunderbolts is going to include Carnage. That's random. You'd think it would be more like the movie team and less like everything else. Lance McNair left halfway through the new Snow White movie. It's interesting. I saw a lot of people saying it was good at first. I think that must have been like advanced screenings. And then the tide changed really fully. Sinister sounding like Tim Curry from Rocky Horror Picture Show. Yes, that is my headcanon exactly, Novark. Oh my days, I now need Tim Curry to play Mr. Sinister. That would be such perfect casting. Why would you show me something if I can't have it? Well, just have somebody who does a really good Tim Curry voice. I can't always do it. And I recognize that I'm doing a character of it, but I just love his voice. Clue is my favorite movie, so I love Tim Curry hugely. And of course, I love Legend. I love Rocky Horror Picture Show. I just love Tim Curry. But his voice to me has always been the Mr. Sinister voice. I think even in the 90s to a degree, I heard that voice, but I never liked the voice from the cartoon. But then especially when we got to funny Sinister, silly Sinister, after Gillen and Hickman got their hands on him, now he's officially his voice. Who are some of my top comic cover artists? That's hard because I don't pay attention as much to the names on covers as I do on interiors. Plus, I really like covers to match the interiors. So I'm often looking for an interior artist who does good covers because I have no use for cover artists. Like, I love Jen Bartel, obviously. She's amazing. And she has done interiors before. But like, if she's drawing the covers and somebody else is doing the interiors, I will just go whip right past that cover because it's not a good advertisement for the interior. So I'm kind of the wrong person to ask this question because I just don't have a lot of opinions. A lot of times I like individual covers from Dynamite, which I've been highlighting on some of their books, but I like the cover artists don't always stick with me. So I guess I can try to do a better job. There's always things we can do better in our interrogation of comics. Casa de Finch, I had to change just collecting Omnis and Finest from DC. You're exactly right. Too many trades. I only get a trade if it doesn't have a bigger collection. There's no sign of a collection coming. Same for me. My rule of thumb tends to be, am I going to read it 3 times? Am I going to read it the initial time I read it? Am I going to then pick it back up and page through it at some point because I fondly remember it? And then I'm going to read it a whole other time straight through. Only then will I get something physically. And I know it seems like I have so much, but a lot of this was tipped into motion before I had that rule. Or in the case of Epic Collections, they follow that rule. I open up extra Epic Collections all the time. But yeah, I will. That's why I don't buy trades anymore. Because I bought all of Marvel Now. I have every single Marvel Now trade. They're all in boxes in the stacks downstairs. And I there's very few of those I revisited. I revisited Hickman's Avengers, Ryan North's Squirrel Girl, very little else. So, which is not to say they're bad comics, but just in a world that always has new comics and has a near infinite number of old comics that I haven't read yet, I just don't need to keep going back and back and back. Stoops, hello Stoops, loving the new God series. I feel like I'm seeing so many new names today. It's so nice of you all to chime in and comment. Is it because I'm in HD? Pity Mouth trying to Kane saying all winters on the wish list as a deluxe, waiting to pull the trigger for physical. James Abel saying One World Under Doom, what a masterpiece in storytelling, from the conversation with Doom and Valyria, Fantastic Four becoming enemies in the eyes of the people. Ryan Wilson, body horror. When does Dan Waters not use that in one of his stories? Well, exactly. That's kind of his thing. Eric Garza, few interpersonal relationships energize me as much as Doom and Valyria. I agree. Anytime those characters interact, it's my favorite thing. Agreed. It's just so wonderful to have that one small chip in Doom's armor be the child of his worst enemy. There's just so dense. There's so much interesting there. George Chimov says, so far I think this has been pretty bad. North has written better Doctor Doom series than FF. I might drop this. Yeah, I think issue 1 worked for me for specific reasons, but I had a lot of trouble with the story in the second one. James Abel, if you told me Out of Alcatraz would be based on a true story after they escape, I would believe you. All the characters seem so real and unique to each other. Also, Tyler Crook arc looked amazing. Who knows? Maybe Chris Cantwell's dad is really one of the escaped convicts. We'll never know. But it is on Global Comics. So that I was saying, the price pays for itself. Pardon me, pays for itself. If you read The Lost Boy and Out of Alcatraz today on Global Comics, that the price you would have paid for them in Comixology will pay for your whole month of your Global Comics subscription. A lot of One World Under Doom reactions. One World Under Doom 2 is better than issue 1. Ooh, a really wide range of responses, especially the Valeria Doom portion. Seems like we're all agreed on that. But I feel like the tie-ins have been better than the main event book so far. Ryan Wilson has heard One World Under Doom has been very bad. I thought the first issue was amazing. I do not agree. The FFM portrayed is very dumb. That I agree. In this issue, they were. The first issue, they weren't. But this issue, it feels like... I don't like any book that assumes a character has to be stupid in order to make the book work. Eric Garza, Out of Alcatraz is just a fantastic comic. Cantwell's hit or miss for me. I agree. Maybe a little more hit than miss with me, but hit and miss. But Tyler Crook cooks and everything he draws. Can't wait for more. Eric Casa de Finch lives in the Bay Area all my life, and they did not make it between sharks and current and cold. The Bay is cold. We in Northern California, not South. Right. So the idea is that they all died in real life, but this book posits they did not. Okay. Pity Ma finally catching up on Absolute Wonder Woman, waiting for issue number 5. Who knew it would be so good? Oh, because Pity Ma is reading on the DC app. Cool Angel Psylocke. The defeat of Ty happened easier than I expected. Yeah, kind of came and went. Seems like Ileana is not going to be the only one having identity problems in the near future, which also starts to feel repetitive. Are we going to have every one of our female protagonists go into their own book and have an identity problem? It starts to feel like maybe you shouldn't have greenlit all those books, Tom Brevoort. Eric Garza, Power Fantasy trade does not contain the letters and back matters. I started picking up singles after falling in love with the trade and based on my excitement over how I does letter pages. Gillen's back matter essays are incredible, and they apparently my buying it every month digitally is validated. One Wheelchair X is One World Under Doom. This is the most I've ever seen you have opinions on one book as a crowd since there's some other book a couple weeks ago that you all went off on, but it's the event. Glad to see somebody, redacted for spoilers, hasn't been completely forgotten about since the Infinity comic, and that she's actually getting involved in a Marvel event without the X-Men. Do I even know who you're talking? I don't even know I'd have to reread it. I didn't even catch who that was. Omnibo 57 watching and only 37 thumbs up. Omnibo is like the whip, not like a whip that gets cracked, but like the whip in the House of Representatives that gets all the votes together, but really is still cracking the whip. But I appreciate that. Okay. James Abel, Rockefeller's number 4. Once again, you give me more questions and answers. Also, Cowgirl Reggie. Yes, please. I can see more in that design. Ryan Wilson is waiting for Saga to end before binging the whole thing. That could take another 6 or 7 years. James Abel read Spectrum because I did not ride the Soul Train to find out everything has music in it if you just listen for it. Also, Dark Phoenix had a cameo. Interesting. Okay. Here's somebody who read the first issue of The Last Days of Lex Luthor. Ryan Williamson said, loved the first issue, but haven't read the second issue. It's been so long since issue 1 came out. I can't even remember what happened, but I do remember it being good. Cruel Angel has been reading Synap, not just me. I like it. It's just a bit different to make it their own mecha story. My feels they're going to find out there's a mental link between anyone that has been a driver. I agree. That's where they're going. Okay, so I feel validated that not only is anybody else reading it, but also it's like there is something to it. Like there's something interesting and different. It's not the same as Power Rangers. It's not the same as Mecha U. Like there's something unique about it that makes it interesting. Meyer HQ LOLing at something. Who knows what could have been happening at that point that I was causing an LOL. James Abel TVA number 4. I think this is the best issue so far. Oh, I think it was the worst issue so far. It gave, that we'll talk about in counseling this week. It gave you time with all the characters, but the ending felt like a repeat of issue 3. There we can agree. Also, James read Ultimate X-Men 13. Welcome to the red, white, and black issue. And once again, I couldn't tell what you had happened. And also read Ultimate Black Panther. What just happened? Okay, well, validating me skipping both of those. Georgie Chimchimov also agreeing after, they had great issues this month, last month, but this month I felt pretty lost and confused. But Ryan Wilson does love how Peach Momoko puts all the extra stuff in the back of her book that goes on to get some of the behind the scenes stuff, and you learn about some of the items used in the book. Ryan Wilson also dropped Uncanny X-Men because he didn't like it. Yeah, me too, actually. It'll be the first time that I'm reading X-Men comics without reading Uncanny X-Men. And because not even 6 issues in, they're making an event, and now they're doing another event with more titles a few issues later. Yeah, I hear ya. And James Abel and Zenitana number 2. The artwork is amazing. The plot is up and down for me so far. I did enjoy this one more than number 1, and also give me more Detective Chim. One Wheelchair X is still here, staying up pretty late at night in the UK right now. I do think Thorne has done a lot of good for Sage, which I really enjoy. It feels like we have too many threads to tie up in one. Yeah, it feels impossible to tie up all that La Diablo stuff. And who aren't they going to tell us who's the red guy? They promised us that like all would be revealed, and it's not Colossus. And then Colossus is like brainwashed and fighting them, and he's like turned his arm into a sword, which is like, is that a new power now, or is it just because he's under a spell from La Diabla? I just like it seems like a lot to wrap up. Maybe they'll let the issue be giant sized at least, but who knows. Cruel Angels, Zatanna is their favorite new series. The art and colors are so spectacular. One Wheel Track, who is resurrected in X-Force, which I loved, and who has been solicited to be returning in Phoenix number 12. Quite surprised Brevoort is allowing all these resurrections when that was Krakoa's whole shtick. And I finally made it to the bottom. Well, thank you for sticking with me. We had such a strong start. Everything was moving fast at the beginning, but it was just so many books this week. I'm going to get this under 3 hours. Somehow I will. And I still feel like I got to a lot of your comments, but it just was a lot faster, and I didn't take as many questions. I think looking back at past streams, when I start taking questions in the middle, the questions can last for like 5-10 minutes. I just tried to avoid that, but I still love that. So maybe it's time to spin off another stream where we do more of the questions. I don't know. So here's the things I'm interested in hearing from you this week. A, did I get you to read any books you hadn't read already out of Alcatraz? I would love to know that in the comments after, if you're watching this later, or in the chat, because I will reread every message in the chat. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to chat with me. I want to know if I added one semi-regular additional stream, actually 2, because the first one is absolutely going to be DCBS. We're doing DCBS every month. That's coming back next month. So if I add a second stream, what would you want it to be? Would you want it to be book club? Would you want it to be interviews? Would you want it to be music? Let me know your thoughts, because I think we might try to get one more thing in the calendar, although gosh knows my life is busy. But you know what? I made 2 new guides last week. The other new one, by the way, was a guide to Rick Remender's Giant Generator. Every series in Giant Generator and how they are collected and what order they came in and what wave of Giant Generator they're on. The patrons don't even know that. Yeah, because I haven't done a Patreon post. That's how busy I was getting ready for the show. So I'm very interested in knowing what you would like to see me do more of, because while I'm subscribed to this higher level of StreamYard, I might as well take advantage of being in beautiful HD. Is it like my hair is cutting through the screen to you? Well, that's what's happening. So actually, it did really look good today, I think. So those question number 2. And then where am I this week? Well, I believe Evergreen Wolverine is later this week on Near Mint Condition. So tune in for that. It's part of Omar's Omar. Next week will be the first Tuesday of the month, which means, or is it the second Tuesday of the month? I'm on Jess's show. I think it's the second Tuesday, so it won't be next week. And I think that's it for now. I think I'm just on, and but almost at the same time as this show next week is the launch of the Marvel Epic Collection reprint poll, which will be on near mint condition, which I'm kind of involved in ever so slightly in the background. But that's Curtis's chance to be the star and be in the sun, as he should, because he's a wonderful person and he knows so much about comic books. So this show might be earlier next week. Might be an hour earlier, might be half hour earlier. I haven't decided, because I want to watch the kickoff of the reprint show. But that also means we're almost to the Marvel Omnibus reprint poll, which I am on the kickoff of, and the Tiger Eyes Marvel Omnibus secret ballot coming pretty soon, and I am one of the co-hosts of that along with Omar and Tiger Eyes. So I'm very excited. It means lots of content coming your way sometime soon on Crushing Crisis and on Near Mint Condition. Okay, well, I'm going to play a song. This song, back in 2010, I had just moved into a new house, and I had a studio space really for the first time. So I really had room to like go and write and play guitar, and it was great. And there was this person in my local community who I knew of, but didn't really know, named Eric Smith, who was writing his first book. He'd been a literary agent and a marketer for a while, and he was releasing this book. And as part of the advertising for this book, he was putting it out as a podcast, narrating the book. So a lot of my friends were friends with him, and they were on the podcast. And so I started listening to the podcast of his audiobook and started really, really falling in love with the characters in the book. And so I sat down with my guitar in my new studio and I wrote a song, and I emailed him to be like, you don't know me. You might know me. I'm that crisis person, but I'm friends with all your friends. And I heard your podcast and I loved the story, and I wrote the song. And so he's like, that's so cool. I never thought anybody would do that. And he's a huge music fan. He used to tour with rock bands as their photographer. So I became friends with Eric, and I wound up being on that podcast of that book, which was called Textual Healing, which he doesn't sell anymore because now he's like a real represented author. And he just launched his own literary agency, which I think is so cool. So I've been really thinking about him in the last week. He was an agent at another agency, and he's been an author this whole time, and he now has his own literary agency. And I'm just looking on my profile on Blue Sky because I want to remind myself of what the name of it was when I tweeted about it or posted about it last week. So just give me a second to find that. It's from before I read Saga. Here it is. It is neighborhoodliterary.com. Of course, that doesn't mean a whole lot to you unless you're trying to pitch somebody a book. But I just love that he's doing his own thing. And then I know this guy because 15 years ago, I wrote this song about his book. So actually, I wrote 4 songs about his book, 2 of which have never been heard on the internet. However, the second one is that song I play in the intro, But this was written first, and this is called Curved Sketch and Letter. So thank you so much for watching, especially if you're still sticking around. Please please subscribe. It does help me. It helps more people see, but especially if you saw me talk about a book that you've been wanting to recommend to people, if you send them the clip of me talking about the book, that is really helpful to me as well. It's really helpful when you support on Patreon, and trust me, I can see the support. The number has really gone up. It makes a big difference. We're on StreamYard this week. Everything's wonderful. And this song is called Curves Sketched in Letters. Why did I give myself a song where I was going to have to sing a V over and over again? I don't know. That's not very wise, but I did anyway. All right, so now here's where I push the whole desk away from me and everything in my room falls and collapses. Okay, hold on. A lot of literal moving parts. Oh my gosh, the ring light's falling over. Everything's collapsing. Okay. And I'm not going to see your comments from here on out because, as we've established, when I try to read the comments at the same time that I play the music, I stop being able to play music. So this is called Curves, Sketches, and Letters. Thanks so much, y'all. Can't be quite that fast or else we'll never make it. One more time. We could do better. Did you see that viral clip of Amanda Seyfried playing Joni Mitchell's California on a dulcimer on the Jimmy Fallon show? It's one of my favorite songs of all time. Blue is my favorite album of all time. Her voice is just so beautiful. She hit those crystalline highs. But she did that thing where she's like, no, we're going to start again. I learned the wrong lesson, strung along by her eyes, green like comfort, deep like desire, by the naked light of a naked bulb. I'm all alone she wants is a face on the page. Curve sketch and letters, yeah. I tried to find balance at the wrong address. I found a girl on a tightrope, making a mess of a net split below her, dispensing her best opinions by the naked light of a naked bulb. I'm all alone, and her bare body on my bare brain is where she'll remain. All she wants is a face on the page. Curve sketch and letters. She thought I had what you wanted, so she wanted me bad. But when I had her, I had nothing left to spare. Well, there's no point in saying there's no signs of affection. If there were signs, we could see them and then change direction by the naked light of a naked bulb. I'm all alone, and her bare body on my bare brain is where she remains. All she wants is a face on the page. Curve sketch and letters. I see her walking away. Curve sketch and letters, it's the same refrain. Curve sketch and letters, yeah. Not only do I have to say curves, I have to say curves a lot. So I've been Krisis. You've been wonderful. Take care of each other in the world. Everybody's got rights, including trans people, rights for all women, people of color. Let's respect that in the world, and let's make our voices heard, especially if we live in the United States. To your representatives, they care when you call in. I tried it myself, and they really do. Take care, everybody, and we will see each other very soon.